Hello guys, welcome to Soul Fiction. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was found the harem omnitrix watchin' married alien princess? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. A Star in the Forest of Death. The air in the Forest of Death was a thick, wet blanket of decay and chlorophyll. For 3 days, it had been their world. 3 days of mud, blood, and the omnipresent, watching eyes of things that slithered in the canopy and stalked in the undergrowth. Team 7 was frayed at the edges, their orange and blue and pink standing out like a fresh wound against the deep greens and browns of the forest floor. They had their Earth Scroll. The Heaven Scroll, however, remained elusive, and their time was draining away like water through cupped hands. Hunger gnawed at Naruto's belly with a dull, persistent ache he was all too familiar with, but it was the exhaustion that was truly dangerous. It made you slow. It made you sloppy. Sasuke was in the lead, his dark eyes canning the oppressive tangle of roots and vines with a hunter's intensity. Every snapped twig, every rustle of leaves, brought his head around, hand already drifting towards the pouch on his hip. Sakura followed a few paces behind him, her face pale with strain, her knuckles white where she gripped a kunai. She was trying to project an aura of readiness, but Naruto could see the tremor in her hands. He brought up the rear, deliberately forcing a bounce into his step he didn't feel. Morale was a weapon, and right now, theirs was dangerously blunt. Anything, Sasuke, Sakura whispered, her voice barely carrying over the hum of insects. No, he clipped back. It's too quiet. I don't like it. He was right. The normal chorus of the forest had faded into a low, expectant hush. The kind of silence that precedes a lightning strike. Naruto's senses, always sharp and made sharper by the feral passenger in his gut, screamed at him. He could taste the ozone of building chakra, the scent of damp earth and something metallic, like unsheathed steel. We're being watched, Naruto said, his voice low and serious for once. The forced grin had vanished. All sides. Sasuke shot him a look, a flick of surprise that Naruto had sensed it too, quickly replaced by his usual arrogant mask. Stay sharp. On my mark. He never finished. The world dissolved into mist. One moment they were in a suffocatingly dense forest. The next they were in a gray, featureless void. The mist was thick, clinging, and impossibly cold, leaching warmth from their skin and muffling all sound. Hidden mist jutsu. Sakura's voice was sharp with panic. Get back to back. Naruto scrambled towards the sound of her voice, bumping into Sasuke's solid form. They formed a tight triangle, their backs pressed together, kunai held out into the impenetrable gloom. The air grew heavy, thick with killing intent. It was a physical pressure, a promise of violence that made the hairs on Naruto's arms stand on end. Show yourselves, cowards, Naruto yelled into the mist, his voice sounding flat and dead. A chuckle answered him, seeming to come from everywhere at once. It was a wet, gurgling sound, like water draining from a corpse's lungs. Cowards. No, little Konoha leaf. We are predators, and you are trespassing. 3 figures materialized from the gray. They wore the standard flak jackets of Kurigakure, their faces obscured by masks. But it was their eyes that held Naruto's attention. They were cold, dead things, like a shark's eyes. They didn't look at them as fellow shinobi, but as meat. An Uchiha, the leader rasped, his eyes fixed on Sasuke. He was a tall man with a long, thin blade strapped to his back that seemed to weep water droplets onto the forest floor. And the Jinchuriki, Lord Yagura will be pleased. We'll take the scrolls, and your heads. Sasuke's eyes bled into the crimson of the Sharingan. You can try. The fight was not a duel. It was a deconstruction. The Kiri-nin moved with a liqua grace that was perfectly suited to the mist, appearing and disappearing at will. They were a well-oiled machine, their teamwork flawless. The leader, who they called Raiga, engaged Sasuke directly, his blade a shimmering arc of death that forced the Uchiha onto the defensive. Sasuke's Sharingan was a powerful tool, but Raiga was faster, stronger, his movements unpredictable as a river's current. The other two, a hulking brute with gills on his cheeks and a lithe woman who moved like a water snake, descended on Naruto and Sakura. Naruto's shadow clones were useless. He'd create a dozen, and the big one, Tsuko, would plow through them with a single, massive wave of water jutsu, sending splinters of wood and pulped clones everywhere. The woman, Maizu, was the real threat. She used Senbon needles, coated in a fast-acting paralytic. Sakura managed to deflect a volley aimed at her, but another caught her in the shoulder. She cried out, her arm going limp, and stumbled back. Sakura, Naruto roared, seeing the brutish Tsuko bearing down on her. He threw himself in front of her, forming a cross-shaped seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 50 Narutos erupted into existence, a chaotic orange tide that slammed into the Kiri shinobi. For a moment, sheer numbers seemed to work. But it was like trying to punch water. The Kiri nin flowed through the clones, dispelling them with brutal efficiency. Naruto felt the phantom pangs of their destruction in his mind, a dizzying onslaught of disorientation. The real Naruto broke through the melee, a Rasengan already forming in his palm. He had one shot. He surged towards Maizu, the spiraling sphere of chakra screaming like a tiny hurricane. She was too fast. She shimmered, creating a water clone in her place, and sidestepped his charge. Naruto's Rasengan tore through the clone, sending a spray of water into the mist, and he stumbled, overextended and off balance. That was the opening they needed. Tsuko's massive fist, encased in a shell of hardened water, caught Naruto square in the ribs. The air exploded from his lungs in a pained gasp. He was thrown backward, tumbling through the undergrowth until his back slammed into the thick trunk of an ancient tree with a sickening crack. Stars burst behind his eyes. He tried to push himself up, but his body wouldn't obey. A warm, coppery taste filled his mouth. From his position on the ground, he had a perfect, horrifying view of the battlefield. Sakura was down, clutching her paralyzed arm, trying desperately to drag herself away. Sasuke was on one knee, his shirt torn, panting heavily as Raiga stood over him. The tip of his longsword resting on Sasuke's shoulder. "Your precious eyes are fast, Uchiha," Raiga hissed, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "But you are still just a boy. You lack stamina. You lack hate." He pressed the blade down, drawing a thin line of blood. "Leave him alone," Naruto screamed, forcing himself to his hands and knees. The red, healing chakra of the nine tails began to bubble to the surface, knitting his cracked ribs together with agonizing slowness. Raiga glanced over, his dead eyes dismissive. "The demon container still has some fight left. Tsuko, Maizu, finish the girl and the loudmouth. I will enjoy dissecting the Uchiha." Tsuko grinned, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth, and started towards Sakura. Maizu appeared in a swirl of mist directly in front of Naruto. A senbon held delicately between her fingers, its tip aimed for the base of his neck. "It's over, little fox," she whispered. This was it. He was out of clones, out of tricks. His Rasengan took too long to form, and he was too injured to move. He could see the fear in Sakura's eyes, the humiliation and rage in Sasuke's. They had failed. He had failed. He squeezed his eyes shut, a guttural snarl of defiance his only remaining weapon. He wouldn't die whimpering. He would die angry. A sound cut through the mist. It wasn't a jutsu or a weapon. It was a high-pitched, piercing shriek, like metal tearing itself apart at an impossible speed. A brilliant light sliced through the gray gloom, a searing emerald streak that burned their retinas. The ground beneath them shook violently, a deep, resonant tremor that threw Maizu off balance. Whump crunch. Less than 50 meters away, something impossibly large and impossibly fast slammed into the forest. The impact was cataclysmic. A shockwave of displaced air blasted the mist away in an instant, revealing the stunned faces of the Kiri nin. Trees were flattened in a perfect circle, their ancient trunks snapped like twigs. In the center of the devastation was a crater, glowing with an otherworldly green light and belching plumes of steam into the humid air. Everyone froze. Shinobi were trained for any eventuality, but the Ri was no protocol for a star falling out of the sky in the middle of a battle. Raiga was the first to recover. What in the name of the Mizukage? But Naruto wasn't looking at the Kiri nin anymore. He was looking at the crater. Something was calling to him. It wasn't a voice. It was a feeling, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated in his bones, in his very chakra. It felt familiar, like a missing piece of himself he never knew he'd lost. He didn't know why. He didn't know how, but he knew he had to get to it. Ignoring the fire in his ribs and the spinning in his head, he surged to his feet and ran. The Jinchuriki is escaping, Tsuko bellowed. Don't let him get away, Raiga commanded. Maizu was closest. She flickered through a set of hand signs, and a volley of water bullets shot towards Naruto's back. He didn't even try to dodge. He just ran, fueled by an instinct more powerful than any fear of death. He dove into the crater, the superheated earth scalding his hands. At the bottom of the smoldering pit lay the source of the light. It wasn't a rock, it was a metallic sphere, about the size of a fist, made of a material so black it seemed to drink the light. As he watched, the sphere cracked open like a seed pod, retracting with a series of silent, precise clicks. Nestled inside on a bed of soft, green light was a device. It was an oversized watch, sleek and gray, with a faceplate shaped like a green hourglass. The hum intensified, pulling at him. He reached out, his fingers trembling. Naruto, get away from there. He heard Sasuke yell, a note of genuine alarm in his voice. Too late. The moment his fingertips brushed the cool metal, the device sprang to life. Two metallic pincers shot out, wrapping around his left wrist with impossible speed and strength. They clamped down with a solid thunk. Locking into place, a searing green light erupted from the faceplate, crawling up his arm in glowing circuits. Pain, unimaginable and absolute. It felt like every cell in his body was being simultaneously torn apart and rewritten. He screamed, a raw, ragged sound of pure agony. His chakra flared, the Kyuubi's malevolent energy rising to fight the alien intrusion, but the G-Reen energy from the watch met it head-on, suppressing it, integrating it. Floods of information poured into his mind, not knowledge, but instinct. The cellular structure of 1,000 different species. The predatory urges of 100 alien worlds, the life cycles of stars, the cold vacuum of deep space. It was too much. His mind was breaking. What is that thing doing to him? Sakura cried. Outside the crater, the Kiri-nin watched with a mixture of confusion and avarice. Some kind of weapon, Tsuko grunted. It doesn't matter. Kill him now, while he's helpless. Raiga ordered. Maizu leapt into the crater. Her kunai aimed at Naruto's heart. He was still on his knees, head thrown back, screaming as his body convulsed. As she descended, his head snapped up. His eyes were no longer blue. They were blazing green, burning with the light of a distant galaxy. The hourglass symbol on the watch face flashed. The outer ring twisted, and a silhouette appeared in the green glow, a tall, lanky figure with a pointed head. With a final, ground-shaking slam, the faceplate depressed. A pillar of emerald light erupted from the crater, shooting into the sky. Maizu was blasted back, sent tumbling through the air. The light was so intense, so powerful, that everyone had to shield their eyes. It wasn't chakra, it was something else entirely, something primal and overwhelmingly potent. The light receded, drawn back into the figure standing where Naruto had been. But it wasn't Naruto. Not anymore. The being was tall, nearly 7 feet, with a body that looked like living magma. Its skin was a shifting mosaic of bright red and molten yellow rock, with cracks through which pure, white-hot energy pulsed. Its head was a single, blazing point of fire, and its hands were disproportionately large, ending in 3 thick fingers. A faint, smoldering version of the hourglass symbol was embedded in its chest. It stood up, steam hissing off its rocky hide, and looked at its own fiery hands with a sense of detached curiosity. A new voice, layered and deep, like stones grinding together at the center of the earth, echoed from its form. Heat blast. The name was an instinct, a label pulled from the torrent of data that had flooded Naruto's mind. Sasuke stared, his Sharingan spinning as he tried to comprehend what he was seeing. This power, it dwarfed the Kyuubi's aura. It felt like standing next to the sun. Naruto, he breathed, uncertain. Heat blast turned its burning head towards him. There was no face, no expression, but Sasuke felt a flicker of recognition in that fiery gaze. Then, the being turned its attention to the Kiri-nin. Raiga, Tsuko, and Maizu had their weapons drawn, but for the first time, they looked uncertain. Scared. What is that? That monster? Tsuko stammered, taking an involuntary step back. Raiga gritted his teeth, his bravado returning. It's a transformation jutsu. A powerful one. Don't be intimidated. It's still him. Attack together. They surged forward. Tsuko spat a massive jet of water. A powerful torrent that could strip bark from trees. Water style. Raging waves. The water hit Heat Blast and evaporated in a massive, instantaneous cloud of steam that filled the clearing. Before the steam could even dissipate, a fireball the size of a boulder erupted from within it, sailing towards Tsuko. The big man barely had time to raise his arms in a defensive posture before the plasma sphere hit him. The explosion threw him back 100 feet, his flak jacket melted and smoking, his body covered in severe burns. He hit the ground and didn't move. Tsuko! Maizu screamed. Heat Blast took a step forward, the ground beneath his feet turning to glass from the sheer heat. He pointed a finger at Maizu. A thin, concentrated beam of fire shot out, faster than any Senbon. She tried to dodge, but the beam clipped her leg. She shrieked as her pants caught fire, and she tumbled to the ground, frantically trying to smother the flames. Raiga was a cage-level threat for a reason. He didn't panic. He channeled lightning chakra into his longsword, the blade crackling with deadly energy. He vanished in a burst of speed, reappearing behind Heat Blast, his SWO. Road descending in a lethal arc aimed at the creature's neck. Die, monster! The lightning-infused blade struck the rocky hide. Instead of cutting through, it sank an inch deep and then stopped, the tall glowing cherry red from the intense heat. Heat Blast didn't even flinch. It slowly turned its head, its fiery gaze fixing on Raiga. It reached up, grabbing the superheated sword with one hand. The metal groaned and began to melt, dripping like wax onto the forest floor. Raiga's eyes went wide with terror. He tried to pull his weapon back, but it was fused to the creature's grip. Impossible. Heat Blast's other hand came up, palm open. A wave of fire, a literal tsunami of plasma, washed over Raiga. The Kiri leader's scream was short, cut off as the fire consumed him. When it subsided, there was nothing left but a scorched patch of earth and the molten hilt of his sword. The clearing fell silent. The battle, which had been a desperate struggle moments before, was over in less than a minute. Heat Blast stood in the center of the destruction he had wrought, plumes of smoke rising from his body. He looked at the two unconscious Kiri nin, then at the spot where Raiga had been. The rage that had fueled Naruto was gone, replaced by a cold, alien understanding of power. This was a predator's work. Efficient. Final. He then turned to look at his teammates. Sakura was staring, her mouth agape. Her earlier fear forgotten and replaced by sheer, unadulterated awe. Sasuke was on his feet, his Sharingan still active, but his fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. The look on his face wasn't one of gratitude. It was a toxic cocktail of shock, fury, and a deep, gnawing envy that twisted his features into a snarl. This power, this effortless, overwhelming power. It was what he craved, what he felt he deserved. And the dead last, the idiot Naruto, had just stumbled into it. Heat Blast felt a sudden, dizzying wave of weakness. The hourglass symbol on his chest began to flash red, beeping with an urgent electronic tone. The fire that composed his body flickered, and the intense heat in the clearing began to subside. A final, brilliant flash of red light enveloped him, and when it faded, Naruto was lying on the ground, unconscious, his body steaming slightly. The oversized watch on his wrist was now glowing a soft red, in a recharge mode. Sasuke was the first to move. He strode over to where Naruto lay, his expression dark. He looked down at his teammate, then at the strange device clamped to his wrist. He reached down, his fingers brushing against it. Perhaps he could take it. Perhaps this power could be his. A kunai whizzed past his ear, embedding itself in the tree behind him. Don't even think about it, Sasuke. Sasuke turned. Kakashi-sensei was standing on a branch above them. His single eye narrowed, his expression unreadable. Anko and a team of Proctor Chunin were fanning out behind him, securing the area. We saw the light from the tower, Kakashi said, his voice calm, but with an undercurrent of steel. Care to explain what happened here? Sasuke just stared at Naruto's unconscious form, his jaw tight. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Later, after the unconscious Kiri nin had been secured and Sakura's paralysis treated, Naruto finally woke up in a medical tent at the base of the tower. His head was pounding, and his whole body AC. Head as if he'd gone 10 rounds with Guy-sensei. The memories came back in disjointed, feverish flashes. The mist, the pain in his ribs, the green light, the crater, and the fire. The incredible, all-consuming fire. He shot up, his eyes wide. He looked down at his left wrist. The device was still there, now a sleek black and gray, the faceplate dark. He yanked at it, but it wouldn't budge. It felt like it was fused to his skin. He pulled down his sleeve, his heart hammering in his chest. What was this thing? What had it done to him? The tent flap opened, and Kakashi walked in, his expression grim. "You're awake," he said. "Good. We need to talk." Naruto swallowed, his mouth suddenly dry. "Kakashi-sensei. I can explain." "Can you?" Kakashi sat down on the edge of the cot, his gaze intense. "Enko's report says you were defeated. Team 7 was about to be eliminated. Then a meteorite hits, and a few minutes later, 2 of the enemy are incapacitated with third-degree burns, and their leader is incinerated. Sasuke says you turned into some kind of fire monster." He paused. "He also said it wasn't the Kyuubi." Naruto looked down at his lap. He couldn't tell him the truth. He could just imagine the third Hokage and the council learning about this. They'd take it from him. They'd lock him in a lab and study him like some kind of bug. They'd see it as another weapon, another monster to be controlled. This felt different. It was his. The first thing that had ever been truly his. It was the fox, Naruto mumbled, the lie tasting like ash. "I got angry, and the seal must have slipped a little. I don't really remember it." Quote. Kakashi was silent for a long time. Naruto could feel his sensei's gaze boring into him, dissecting the lie. He knew Kakashi didn't believe him. Not for a second. "All right, Naruto," Kakashi said finally, his voice soft. "If that's your story, stick to it. But know this, whatever that power was, it paints an even bigger target on your back than the one you already have. There are people in this village, and outside of it, who will stop at nothing to get their hands on a power like that. Be careful." He stood up to leave. At the tent flap, he paused. "One more thing. You passed. You got your heaven scroll from that team." He tossed a scroll onto the cot beside Naruto. "Get some rest. The final rounds are in a month." Naruto was left alone with his thoughts and the heavy weight on his wrist. He had survived. His team was safe. But as he looked at the strange, alien device, a cold dread washed over him. Kakashi was right. This wasn't just a gift. It was a burden, a secret he would have to carry alone. He spent the next several days in a state of anxious paranoia. He kept his sleeve pulled down, jumping every time someone so much as glanced at his left arm. The watch remained silent, its faceplate dark. He tried twisting the dial, pushing the buttons, everything he could think of, but nothing happened. He began to wonder if it had just been a one-time thing. A fever dream born from desperation. Their team made it to the tower and passed the second stage, joining the other successful teams in the main hall. The tension between him and Sasuke was a thick, unbreachable wall. Sasuke wouldn't look at him, but Naruto could feel the Uchiha's eyes on him whenever he thought no one was watching. It was a look of calculation, of assessment. It wasn't the look of a rival anymore. It was the look of a predator sizing up its prey. On the third night before the preliminary matches were to begin, Naruto couldn't sleep. He snuck out of the room he shared with his team and went to the tower's roof, needing air, needing space. He sat on the edge, looking out over the dark, menacing expanse of the forest of death. He looked at the watch again. He twisted the outer ring, just as he remembered from that flash of instinct in the crater. This time, it moved with a satisfying click. The faceplate lit up with its signature green glow, projecting a small hologram of the fiery creature he'd become. Naruto gasped and nearly fell off the roof. He twisted the ring again. A new silhouette appeared. This one was shorter, bulkier, with 4 powerful arms. Another twist. A creature that looked like a giant, feral dog with no eyes. Another. A crystalline figure. Another. A bug-like creature with wings. A ghostly being. On and on it went, a gallery of alien warriors. There were 10 of them in total. His mind raced. This wasn't a one-off. It was a tool, a weapon, an arsenal. He could be any of them. The potential, the sheer power, was staggering. It was more than he had ever dreamed of. A flicker of movement in the darkness below caught his eye. He squinted. A figure was moving through the forest with incredible speed. Too fast for a normal shinobi. Curious, Naruto twisted the dial until he found a new silhouette, one that looked sleek and fast. He didn't know what he was doing, but the instinct from before was whispering to him, guiding him. He slammed the faceplate down. The green flash was just as intense, but this time he was ready for it. The sensation of his body being rewritten was still jarring, but not agonizing. His bones hollowed out, his legs fused together into a single, wheel-like appendage, and a black helmet with a green visor snapped over his face. He felt fast, impossibly fast. The name came to him instantly. XLR8. He looked down at his new body. A semi-armored velociraptor built on 2 wheels. He took a tentative step, then another. And then he pushed off. The world became a blur of green and brown. He was moving so fast the trees looked like a solid wall. He could think 100 times faster, process information at a superhuman rate. He saw the world in slow motion. He could see every leaf, every insect, as he blazed past them. He caught up to the figure in seconds. It was one of the Suna shinobi, the girl with the giant fan. Temari. She was racing towards the tower, but she was injured, clutching a deep gash on her arm. Behind her, 3 Oto shinobi were closing in, their creepy smiles illuminated by the moonlight. Naruto, or rather XLR8, didn't hesitate. He ran circles around them, literally. He created a small tornado of dust and leaves, disorienting them. Before they could even react, he was on them. A series of impossibly fast kicks and punches, delivered with the concussive force of tiny sonic booms, sent them flying into trees, knocked unconscious before they hit the ground. It was over in 3 seconds. Temari stared, her eyes wide with shock, at the blue and black blur that had just saved her. XLR8 skidded to a halt in front of her, his visor looking down at her wound. "You're hurt," he said, his voice now a high-pitched, rapid-fire staccato. She just nodded, speechless. He scooped her up in his arms before she could protest. "Hold on tight," and then he was running again, a blue streak heading for the tower. He covered the distance in under a minute, depositing a DZY and bewildered Temari on the steps of the main gate before vanishing back into the forest. He found a secluded spot and, just as the symbol on his chest began to beep, he transformed back into Naruto. He leaned against a tree, his heart pounding with adrenaline. This was incredible. He had just saved someone, taken out 3 enemies, and no one even knew it was him. A real hero. A secret hero. A wide, genuine grin spread across his face for the first time in days. Maybe this watch wasn't a curse after all. Far away, in a place beyond space and time, the pulse of energy from this second, controlled transformation echoed. It was a cleaner, more focused signal. It struck the crystalline prison like a tuning fork. The first hairline fracture that had formed on its surface spider-webbed, splitting into a dozen more fissures. From deep within the prison, a second thought, more complex than the first, stirred from its eons-long slumber. A thought that was not just aware, but hungry. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Fugitive Princess. The month leading up to the Chunin exam finals was the strangest of Naruto's life. On the surface, it was a period of intense, focused training under the bizarre tutelage of Jiraiya, the Toad Sage. It was a whirlwind of water-walking exercises, chakra control lessons that felt decades overdue, and the slow, arduous process of learning how to summon something larger than a tadpole. To the rest of Konoha, he was the same hyperactive knucklehead, just with a powerful new sponsor and a lucky ticket to the tournament's main event. They saw him struggling to summon Gamabunta, getting beaten up by the old pervert for peeking at the women's bathhouse, and boasting about how he was going to become Hokage to anyone who would listen. Beneath the surface, however, a secret war was being waged. Every night, when Jiraiya was out conducting his research, and the village was asleep, Naruto would sneak away to the training grounds or the deep woods. There, under the silent gaze of the moon, he would activate the Kinjin tricks. He'd learned its name from the flood of instinct that came with each transformation. It was as much a part of him now as the name Uzumaki. He methodically explored the 10 alien forms that had become his arsenal. He learned that XLR8, the high-speed Kinesolaren, was perfect for reconnaissance but lacked heavy-hitting power. 4 arms, the 4-armed, red-skinned Tetraman, could punch through solid rock but was slow and clumsy. Gray Matter, the tiny, amphibious Galvan, was physically useless but so hyper-intelligent he could understand Jiraiya's most complex Fuinjutsu theories after a single glance. Each transformation was a revelation, and each came with its own set of challenges. He learned that Stinkfly, the insectoid Lepidopteran, was great for aerial mobility but smelled so foul it made him want to gag. Diamondhead, the crystalline Petrosapian, was nearly indestructible and could shape his limbs into blades. But a specific sonic frequency could shatter him. He was building a mental database, a tactical manual for a set of weapons no one else in the world knew existed. He also learned the device's limitations. He could only stay transformed for about 10 to 15 minutes at a time, after which the hourglass symbol would time out, bathing him in red light and leaving him human, vulnerable, and the watch unusable until its glowing red core recharged to green. This secrecy created a chasm between him and his team. Sakura, bless her, tried to bridge it. She'd bring him training snacks, offer to help him study, and fret over his new, more serious demeanor. He'd just flash her a strained grin and tell her he was fine, pushing her away because he didn't know how to let her in without revealing everything. Sasuke was another story. The Uchiha had been taken under Kakashi's wing for private training, and the few times Naruto saw him, the air crackled with a frigid, unspoken animosity. Sasuke's Sharingan would follow him, analyzing, probing, searching for the source of the power he'd seen in the forest. Sasuke didn't see a teammate anymore. He saw a puzzle he needed to solve and a benchmark he had to brutally overcome. The unspoken question hung between them in the air every time their eyes met. What are you? Naruto had no answer to give. On the night before the final matches were to begin, a festival atmosphere had taken hold of Konoha. The streets were thronged with visitors from other villages, foreign dignitaries, and merchants hawking their wares. Lanterns cast a warm, festive glow over the village. But Naruto felt a cold knot of anxiety in his stomach. The lies were piling up, and the weight of the Kinjin tricks on his wrist felt heavier than ever. He was perched on the stone face of the 4th Hokage, hidden in the shadows of his father's sculpted hair, looking down at the celebration. He should have been down there, stuffing his face with ramen, bragging about his upcoming fight with Neji Hyuga. Instead, he was hiding, an alien in his own skin. You've been quiet lately. Naruto didn't startle. He'd sensed Jiraiya's approach a mile away. One of the forms he'd discovered, a blind, dog-like creature called Wildmutt, had senses that were beyond anything human. Even in his own body, a faint echo of that heightened awareness remained. Jiraiya settled down beside him, a serious expression on his face that was a rare and unsettling sight. Worried about the fight tomorrow. That Hyuga kid is the real deal. I can take him, Naruto said, his voice lacking its usual boisterous confidence. I know you can, Jiraiya said, surprising him. But that's not what's eating at you. I've been a spymaster for 30 years, kid. I know when someone is keeping a secret big enough to choke a toad. It's been happening ever since you came out of that forest. Naruto's blood ran cold. He instinctively covered his left wrist with his other hand. I don't know what you're talking about. Jiraiya sighed, a long, weary sound. The 3rd Hokage told me about the report. About what Kakashi's team saw. A fire monster. Incinerated enemies. You blaming it on the 9 tails. He looked Naruto dead in the eye. I know the seal on your gut better than I know my own face. I designed it. It would take an act of God or a key from me to make it slip that badly. So I'll ask you one more time, and I want the truth. What happened in the Forest of Death? Naruto stared at the old man, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He wanted to tell him. He desperately wanted to share the burden. But the fear held him back. Fear of what they would do, how they would look at him. He was already a monster in their eyes. What would he be if they knew he had 10 more hiding under his skin? Before he could answer, a streak of light tore across the night sky. It was brighter than any star, a vibrant, burning thing trailing a tail of turquoise and gold fire. It moved with an unnatural trajectory. Not the gentle arc of a meteor, but a desperate, wounded plunge. It was heading down, and fast, somewhere in the forests far beyond the village walls. The villagers below pointed and gasped, their festive chatter turning to murmurs of awe and confusion. A falling star, Jiraiya breathed, his attention captivated. They say it's good luck. But Naruto knew better. He'd seen a light like that before. The green glow from the crater. This was the same kind of energy. He could feel it, a faint thrum against his skin, a sympathetic vibration from the watch on his wrist. It wasn't a rock, it was a ship, and it was in trouble. I gotta go, Naruto said, jumping to his feet. Go where? The tournament is tomorrow, Jiraiya called after him. But Naruto was already gone, a Florida shish of orange disappearing over the edge of the monument. He raced through the village, a shadow in the alleys, his mind a whirlwind. He had to get there first. He had to know what it was. This was a piece of the puzzle, a clue to the origin of the device that had changed his life forever. He reached the village gates, easily slipping past the Chunin guards who were distracted by the celestial event. Once in the forest, he didn't hesitate. He ducked behind a thicket of ancient cedars, twisted the dial of the omnitrix, and slammed his hand down. The flash of green light illuminated the woods for a brief second. Where the boy had been, a new creature now stood. It was a hulking, ape-like beast, the size of a small bear, covered in shaggy orange fur. It had no eyes, no nose, just a massive mouth filled with sharp teeth. And a series of gill-like structures on its neck that flared as it sniffed the air. This was Wildmutt, the Vulpimancer. Naruto's world dissolved. Sight vanished, replaced by something far more complex. The gills on his neck were an advanced olfactory and auditory system, painting a three-dimensional, topographical map of his surroundings in his mind. He could smell the chlorophyll in every leaf. The trail of a field mouse from 3 days ago, the subtle shift in air pressure that signaled the far-off crash. The world was no longer a picture, it was a symphony of scent, sound, and texture. He took off, a four-legged orange blur bounding through the forest with a primal, predatory grace. He moved in near total silence, his powerful limbs eating up the distance. The scent of the crash was strong now. Ozone, burnt metal, and another smell, something alien and organic he couldn't identify. He arrived at the impact site in minutes. It was a long, gouged-out scar in the earth where the ship had plowed through the forest before finally coming to a rest against a rocky cliff face. The vessel wasn't large, maybe the size of a carriage, and was shaped like a sleek, silver seed. It was clearly not of this world. Its hull was made of a seamless, pearlescent metal that seemed to shift in color, though one side was blackened and torn open, smoke and strange, purple sparks spitting from the wound. He crept closer, his Vulpimancer senses on high alert. He could smell blood, humanoid, but with a strange, sweet undertone, like cinnamon and starlight. He could hear a faint, ragged breathing from within the wreckage, and the soft, rhythmic thump-thump of a heart beating too fast. Someone was alive in there. He was about to investigate when a new scent hit him, making the fur on his back stand on end. It was the smell of ozone again, but this was different. Cold, sterile, it was the scent of a predator, something that hunted with circuits and cold logic. He heard a sound, a low hum that was just at the edge of his enhanced hearing, and a faint shimmer in the air about 100 yards away. Something had just landed. Something was coming. Naruto's instincts screamed at him. Protect the survivor. He didn't know why, he just knew it was the right thing to do. The hourglass on his shoulder started beeping, his time as Wildmutt running out. He ducked behind a massive, overturned root ball just as the red light flashed, returning him to his human form. The omnitrix was red, recharging. He was powerless. The main hatch of the crashed ship hissed open, and a figure stumbled out. It was a woman, tall and slender, with skin the color of pale gold and hair like spun crimson silk that fell to her waist. Her eyes, which glowed with a faint, internal luminescence, were the color of emeralds. She wore a fragmented suit of what looked like white and purple armor, torn and scorched in several places, revealing angry-looking burns on her golden skin. In her hand, she clutched a simple, elegant sword that hummed with a soft, green energy. Even injured and desperate, she carried herself with an unmistakable air of nobility. She was a warrior. She was a princess. This was Lyravala. She scanned the forest, her glowing green eyes wide with a mixture of fear and defiance. She took a few unsteady steps before leaning against the hull of her ship, clutching a wound in her side. A voice, cold and synthesized, echoed through the clearing. Fugitive designated. Target acquired. Surrender the royal heir, and your deaths will be swift. Lyravala's head snapped up, her expression hardening into a mask of pure hate. Naruto peered over the root ball. Standing at the edge of the clearing was a nightmare forged from metal and malice. It was a bipedal robot, at least 8 feet tall, with a bulky, gunmetal gray chassis and glowing red optics. One of its arms ended in a multi-barreled plasma cannon, while the other terminated in a set of crackling energy claws. It moved with a smooth, hydraulic grace that was utterly terrifying. This was one of Zarkon's hunter-killer drones. Lyravala straightened up, raising her sword despite her injuries. She shouted something at it. A string of harsh, alien syllables that dripped with contempt. The hunter-killer's red eye glowed brighter. Communication not recognized. Translating. Statement identified as, "I will die before I let you lay a single metallic finger on me, scrap heap." Threat level assessed. Lethal force authorized. The plasma cannon on its arm began to whine, charging up with a terrifying sound. Naruto's watch finally flashed green. He didn't have time to think, no time to pick the perfect alien for the job. He just twisted the dial once and slammed it down. He erupted from behind the root ball in a flash of green light, landing between the princess and the drone. The transformation settled, and he was now 10 feet of solid, four-armed muscle. His skin was thick and red, he had 2 pairs of powerful eyes, and 4 massive, well-muscled arms. The Tetraman, 4 arms. "Get your rusty tin can off my planet," he roared, his voice a deep, gravelly bass. The hunter-killer paused, its optical sensor swiveling to analyze this new variable. Unidentified biological entity. Power level significant. Classification. Threat. Lyravala stared at the red-skinned behemoth that had appeared from nowhere, her expression one of utter shock. The drone didn't wait. It fired its plasma cannon. A sphere of brilliant blue energy shot across the clearing. 4 arms reacted on pure instinct. He crossed all 4 of his arms in front of his chest, bracing himself. The plasma blast hit him like a thunderclap, sending him skidding back several feet and scorching his rocky, red hide. The heat was intense, but his thick skin held. He gritted his teeth. It hurt, but he was still standing. "My turn," he yelled. He clapped all 4 of his hands together, creating a massive sonic shockwave that ripped through the air. The drone was rocked back on its heels, its systems momentarily scrambled by the concussive force. 4 arms charged, a 10-foot-tall battering ram of fury. He brought 2 fists down in a massive overhead smash. The drone was fast, sidestepping the main blow, but the attack still shattered the earth where it had been standing. The drone retaliated with its energy claws, swiping at him. 4 arms blocked the attack with 2 of his arms, the claws scraping against his skin with a horrible screech, while his other 2 arms grabbed the drone's weapon arm, trying to tear it off. It was a battle of pure brute force versus relentless technology. While they were locked in a struggle, Lyravala acted. She pointed her glowing sword at the drone and a bolt of brilliant green energy, a star bolt, erupted from the tip. It struck the hunter-killer in its back, causing its systems to spark and sputter. The drone's head swiveled 180 degrees, its red eye fixing on her. Secondary threat identified, eliminating. It disengaged from 4 arms, knocking him back with a powerful energy pulse from its chest, and turned its attention to the princess. "Oh no you don't," 4 arms roared. He grabbed the trunk of a massive, uprooted tree and swung it like a baseball bat, slamming it into the drone's side. The metal chassis dented with a deafening shriek of protesting metal, sending the machine staggering. The battle raged. It was a chaotic dance of destruction. 4 arms would provide the brute force, grappling with the machine, tearing off armor plating, while Lyravala would provide fire support, her star bolts targeting its joints and sensors. They couldn't speak, couldn't coordinate, but they fought with a desperate synergy born of shared survival. He'd throw hymns LF in front of her to block a plasma blast. She'd fire a precise shot to disable the drone's targeting system when it had him pinned. Finally, 4 arms saw an opening. He managed to get a grip on the drone's head with his upper 2 arms, while his lower 2 arms anchored him to the ground. With a primal roar that shook the very trees, he pulled. Metal screamed and tore, circuits sparked, and he ripped the drone's head clean off its shoulders. The hulking metal body stood for a second, then collapsed to the ground with a final, shuddering crash, its red eye fading to black. Silence descended on the clearing, broken only by the crackle of burning wreckage and their own ragged breaths. 4 arms stood over the defeated machine, his massive chest heaving. The hourglass on his chest began to flash red. With a final beep and a flash of light, he was Naruto again, standing in a crater of his own making, looking small and very human amidst the carnage. He looked over at the alien princess. She was leaning on her sword, panting. But her emerald eyes were fixed on him. The suspicion was gone, replaced by a look of weary gratitude and profound confusion. She said something in her language, a soft, questioning word. Naruto just shook his head, holding up his hands to show he didn't understand. Just then, the Kinjin trix on his wrist glowed a soft, pulsing green. A synthetic, female voice emanated from it, not out loud, but directly into Naruto's mind. Alien language detected. Xylarian dialect. Translation matrix engaged. A similar pulse of light emanated from the watch and seemed to flow over to Lyravala, who blinked in surprise. Can you understand me now? Naruto asked tentatively. Her glowing eyes widened. Your voice, it is in my tongue. How? She asked, her own voice a melodic, regal chime, even when strained with exhaustion. It's this thing, Naruto said, holding up the watch. I think it's a universal translator. She took a hesitant step closer, her gaze fixed on the device. The Kinjin trix, the legends were true. She swayed, the adrenaline finally leaving her, and her knees buckled. Naruto rushed forward, catching her before she hit the ground. He was surprised by how light she was. He helped her over to a relatively intact log, and she sank down gratefully. Thank you, she said, looking at him with an intensity that made him feel strangely shy. You saved my life, both as that Titan, and as yourself. Don't mention it, Naruto said, rubbing the back of his neck. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, and you are. I am Princess Lyravala of the Xylarian Empire, she said, a flicker of pride and sorrow crossing her features. Though I fear there is not much of an empire left to be princess of. What was that thing? Naruto asked, gesturing to the headless robot. And why was it after you? Quote. She sighed, the weight of her story settling upon her. That was a hunter-killer unit, in the service of Warlord Zarkon. A tyrant who conquered my home world. He desires a marriage. To legitimize his bloody rule over my people. I refused. I fled. Naruto's eyes hardened. He knew a thing or two about bullies trying to control people's lives. So you're on the run from this Zarkon guy? Yes. And he will not stop. He will send more. His fleet is vast. He will hunt me to the ends of the universe. Her gaze fell upon the forest around them, and a look of horror dawned on her face. By coming here, I have endangered you all. Your entire world. The stakes slammed into Naruto with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just about him and a magic watch anymore. This was about alien warlords and fleets and the fate of his planet. He looked at the wreckage of the drone, at the exhausted princess, and then down at the Kinjin trix on his wrist. The universe had just gotten a whole lot bigger, and a whole lot more dangerous. Don't worry, Naruto said, a fierce, determined grin spreading across his face. It wasn't forced this time. It was real. This Zarkon guy wants a fight. He's come to the right place. Welcome to Earth, princess. We're not so easy to conquer. Lyravala looked at the strange, orange-clad boy with the impossible device on his wrist and the fire of a sun in his eyes. For the first time since she'd fled her burning home world, she felt a flicker of something she thought she had lost forever, hope. Unseen, perched in the IGH branches of the canopy a quarter-mile away, 2 figures in porcelain masks and black cloaks watched the scene unfold. They had felt the energy signatures and had arrived just as the battle concluded. Their emotionless masks betrayed nothing, but their minds were racing. One of them made a subtle hand signal. The message was clear. Observe. Collect. Report to Lord Danzo. They faded back into the shadows as silently as they had come, leaving Naruto and the princess alone in the moonlit clearing, unaware of the new set of eyes now watching them. And throughout Konoha, a troubled sleep fell over its inhabitants. Shinobi and civilians alike tossed and turned, their dreams filled with formless, creeping dread. They dreamed of static, of a great, unblinking eye in a void of nothingness, and a hunger that threatened to consume all light and color from the world. The arrival of the princess, and the brutal fight that followed, had sent another, more powerful ripple through the fabric of reality, and deep in its cosmic prison. The Void Weaver tasted its first real sample of fear. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Council of Shadows. The adrenaline from the battle faded, leaving behind a robbing ache in Naruto's bones and the cold, stark reality of the situation. He stood in a clearing of shattered trees and smoking alien metal with a fugitive princess from another world. The moon, high and indifferent, cast long shadows that made the wreckage of the hunter-killer look like the corpse of some primeval beast. "We can't stay here," Naruto said, his voice low. "My village has sensory ninja. They'll have detected the energy from our fight. Someone will be coming to investigate soon." Lyravala pushed herself to her feet, using her sword as a crutch. The regal defiance had returned to her posture. But Naruto could see the exhaustion in the slump of her shoulders and the pallor of her golden skin. "Where can we go? Your world is a mystery to me. Is there any place safe from the eyes of this Zarkon?" "Nowhere is safe if he has a whole fleet," Naruto admitted grimly. "But for tonight, the safest place is also the most dangerous. The heart of my village, Konoha. He won't look for you there, not yet. But getting you in will be tricky." He looked at her. With her crimson hair, glowing emerald eyes, and fragmented alien armor, she would stand out more than he did in his bright orange jumpsuit. A transformation was his best bet. XLR8 was too conspicuous, forearms too big. He needed stealth. He scrolled through the holographic silhouettes on the Kinjin tricks. He stopped on one he hadn't used in the field yet. A shadowy, ghost-like figure. The instincts that came with the image whispered of intangibility and invisibility. "Perfect. I have an idea," he said. "But you have to trust me. And don't freak out." Before she could question him, he slammed down the faceplate. The familiar green light washed over him. His body became ethereal, his form elongating and dissolving into something made of twilight and smoke. When the light faded, a ghostly creature floated where he had been. It had a single, eerie green eye that traveled along a black track in its phantom-like head. And its body was a swirling cloak of gray and black mist. This was Ghost Freak, an ectonorite. Lyravala gasped, her hand flying to the hilt of her sword. Her eyes were wide with shock and a touch of fear. "It's still me," a voice hissed in her mind. It was Naruto's voice, but layered, with an echoing, spectral quality. "This form can turn invisible. And intangible. I can get us both past the guards." He extended a smoky, clawed hand. "I can make you intangible too, but you have to let me touch you. I promise I won't hurt you." She hesitated for a long moment, her glowing gaze fixed on his single, roving eye. She was a princess, trained to be wary of trickery and strange powers. But she had also seen this boy, this being, throw himself in front of a plasma cannon for her. She had seen the raw, honest determination in his human eyes. She gave a curt nod, a gesture of trust that felt monumental. Naruto, as Ghost Freak, drifted closer. He phased his hand through her shoulder. She shivered, a gasp escaping her lips. The sensation was bizarre, a feeling of icy coldness that seemed to touch her very soul, yet it was not painful. "Okay, now I'll turn us invisible. Just stay quiet and follow my lead," he instructed. With a flicker, they both vanished from sight. To anyone watching, it would seem as if the princess had simply dissolved into the night air. Naruto led the way, floating silently through the dense forest. Lyra's feet barely touching the ground as his power shielded her from the physical world. They passed a Konoha patrol unit, 3 Chunin, led by Genma Shiranui, who swept the area with practiced efficiency. The shinobi passed within inches of them, their eyes seeing nothing, their senses detecting nothing. Naruto could feel Lyra's heart hammering against her ribs, but she remained silent. Her trust in him absolute. Sneaking into the village itself was even more difficult. The walls were lined with detection seals and sensory ninja on high alert. Naruto had to navigate the intricate web of their patrols, his single eye tracking chakra signatures and movement patterns. He guided Lyra over the walls, a silent specter in the night, until they were safely within the village. Hidden in the shadows of an alleyway, He released his hold on her and materialized, the invisibility fading. "See, told you I'd get you in," he whispered, though the spectral voice still sounded unnerving. The hourglass symbol chose that moment to time out. With a red flash, he was Naruto again, leaning against the alley wall, panting from the mental strain. Using the ectonerite for M was draining in a way the others weren't. "Your abilities are remarkable," Lyravia said, her voice filled with genuine wonder. "You wield the Kinjin tricks as if you were born to it." "Still getting the hang of it, actually," Naruto admitted. "Now for the hard part." He looked up at the Hokage Tower, the tallest building in the village, its windows dark save for one at the very top. "I need to introduce you to my grandmother. She is the leader of your village." "Sort of," Naruto said with a wry grin. "Her name is Tsunade. She's the 5th Hokage, the strongest ninja in Konoha. And she has a temper that can level a mountain. This is gonna be fun." Tsunade, 5th Hokage of Konohagakure, was not having a good night. The paperwork was a mountain, the council was breathing down her neck out the budget for the Chunin exam repairs, and her secret stash of sake had been found and confiscated by her overzealous apprentice, Shizune. She was rubbing her temples, fighting off a headache, and her office door slammed open with enough force to crack the frame. "Grandma Tsunade, we have a problem." Tsunade's eyes snapped open, her fist already clenched. "Naruto, I have told you 1,000 times not to kick my door down. And don't call me grandma." Her eyes then fell on the woman standing behind him, and all the anger evaporated, replaced by stunned disbelief. She took in the golden skin, the crimson hair, the bizarre, damaged armor, and the palpable aura of power that radiated from her. Shizune, who had rushed in after Naruto, simply stood there, clutching her pet pig, Tauntaun, her mouth agape. "Naruto." Tsunade's voice was dangerously quiet. "Who is this?" "This is Princess Lyravia," Naruto said, as casually as if he were introducing a new friend from the academy. "She's from space. Her ship crashed. A killer robot tried to grab her, and now a guy named Zarkon wants to blow up the planet to get her back. So, yeah, problem." The silence in the office was absolute. Tsunade stared at Naruto, then at Lyra, then back at Naruto. She slowly, deliberately, placed her head in her hands. "Of course," she muttered into her palms. "Of course it's you. Why is it always you?" "It too." "Okay, the better part of an hour to explain." Naruto recounted the events, from the crash to the battle with the hunter-killer. Lyra, in a calm and regal tone that belied the horror of her story, spoke of the conquest of her world, of Zarkon's tyranny, and of her escape. As proof, she activated a small device on her wrist gauntlet. A 3-dimensional holographic map of star systems filled the office, displaying Zarkon's territories and the vast reach of his war machine. It was technology so far beyond their own understanding that it was practically magic. Tsunade listened, her expression growing progressively grimmer. She circled Lyra, her medical nin eyes assessing the strange burns and injuries. She examined a piece of the destroyed hunter-killer that Naruto had brought back. The evidence was irrefutable. Their world, their small, self-contained planet of warring ninja villages, was a speck of dust on the edge of a galactic conflict they knew nothing about. "I have to call an emergency meeting of the council," Tsunade said finally, her voice heavy. She looked at Lyra, her gaze softening slightly. "Shizune, take the princess to the infirmary. Treat her wounds. Post a guard of your most trusted Anbu. No one is to speak to her without my permission." "And me?" Naruto asked. Tsunade fixed him with a hard stare. "You'll be at that meeting. You started this mess. Now you get to see the people who run this village intend to clean it up." Her tone left no room for argument. The council chamber was a place Naruto had never been. It was a cold, windowless room deep within the Hokage Tower, designed to give the impression of being buried alive. A large, circular table dominated the room, around which were seated the most powerful people in Konoha. On one side were the civilian council members, wealthy merchants and clan heads who controlled the village's economy, their faces pale and sweaty with fear. On the other side sat the true powers, Homura Mitokado and Kaharu Udatane, Tsunade's former teammates and the village elders. They were relics from a bygone era, their faces impassive masks of tradition and rigid authority. And beside them, Separated by a small but significant gap, was Danzo Shimura. The old warhawk sat perfectly still, his bandaged eye and scarred face a testament to a lifetime of clandestine warfare. He radiated an aura of cold, patient ambition that made the air in the room feel thin. Tsunade sat at the head of the table, with Naruto standing behind her right shoulder. He felt like a child at the grown-ups' table, but he squared his shoulders and met their gazes without flinching. Tsunade laid out the situation with blunt, uncompromising clarity. She spoke of the alien princess, the advanced technology, and the ultimatum from a galactic warlord. When she finished, a panicked babble erupted from the civilian council. An alien fleet, attacking Konoha. One portly merchant squealed, "This is madness. We must give them what they want. Hand over the girl." To do so would be to show weakness, Kaharu stated, her voice as brittle as old parchment. It would invite further aggression. However, harboring this fugitive places the village in untenable danger. The situation is unacceptable. The danger is also an opportunity, Danzo said, his voice a soft, silken rasp that cut through the noise. Every eye turned to him. This princess possesses knowledge we can only dream of. Her technology, her understanding of our new enemy, is a weapon. The boy's device is an even greater one. They must both be brought under village control, placed in protective custody, for their own safety, and for the security of Konoha. Naruto felt a surge of cold fury. They were talking about Lyra as if she were an object, a prize to be claimed. She's not a weapon, he snapped, unable to stay silent. She's a person, and she came to us for help. The boy is emotionally compromised, Homura said dismissively, not even bothering to look at Naruto. His judgment cannot be trusted. We should give her to Zarkon, the merchant insisted. It is the only logical solution to ensure peace. Peace. Tsunade slammed her fist on the table, the wood cracking under the force of the blow. You think a tyrant like that will be satisfied with one princess? If we show him we are a world that bows to threats, he will take whatever he wants. Your businesses, your homes, your lives. This is not a negotiation, it is the prelude to an invasion. Then we must seize the advantage, Danzo pressed, his single eye fixing on Naruto. The Jinchuriki has stumbled upon a power he cannot possibly comprehend. It is too dangerous for a single, unstable boy to control. The device must be surrendered to my root division for analysis and safekeeping. Like hell it will, Naruto roared. This watch is a part of me. You're not taking it. You see, Kaharu said, her voice laced with disdain. He is a child throwing a tantrum. They kept arguing, their voices a vicious spiral of fear, greed, and tradition. Naruto watched them, a sickening realization dawning on him. They weren't going to help. They didn't see a person in need of protection. They saw a problem, to be disposed of or an asset to be exploited. They were so busy looking at the trees of their own petty interests that they couldn't see the forest fire that was about to consume them all. He had to make them understand. He had to speak their language. The language of power and logic. He took a deep breath. That's enough. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chamber with a newfound authority that made them all pause. You're all fools, he said calmly. Danzo's eye narrowed. You forget your place, boy. No, you forget yours, Naruto shot back. You're supposed to be leading and protecting this village. But all you're doing is squabbling like children over a new toy. He stepped forward, his blue eyes burning with an intensity they had never seen before. You, he said, pointing a finger at the civilian councilman. You want to hand her over. What do you think Zarkon does next? He knows we had her. He knows we possess technology and abilities he's never seen. Heal, pacify our planet just to be safe. Appeasement is just dying on your knees instead of your feet. He then turned to the elders. And you too, you talk about untenable danger. The danger is already here. Hiding from it won't make it go away. You want to lock Lyra up and pretend this isn't happening until it's too late. Finally, his gaze fell on Danzo. And you're the worst of them all. You want her and the Kinjin tricks. You think you can control them. You think you can make an army of alien soldiers. Do you have any idea what this technology is? Do you know how it works? You'd be more likely to blow up the entire continent than learn how to operate it. You want to fight a galactic empire using a weapon you don't understand, all while the other ninja villages see you hoarding power and decide to attack us first. Your plan is the fastest way to get every single person in this village killed." The council was stunned into silence, not just by his words, but by the cold, brutal logic behind them. This was not the knucklehead they knew. Danzo was the first to recover, a cold smile playing on his lips. Impressive words for a mere genin. But they are just that. Words. You have no solutions, only childish defiance. "That's where you're wrong," Naruto said. He raised his left wrist. "I told you, you don't understand what you're dealing with." He twisted the dial and, in front of the hawked eyes of Konoha's entire leadership, he slammed his palm down on the faceplate. The green light was blinding in the enclosed chamber. The council members recoiled, throwing their arms up to shield their eyes. Danzo's Anbu guard dropped from the ceiling, kunai drawn, but they were too slow. The light receded, and standing on the council table where Naruto had been was a tiny, gray-skinned, og-like creature no bigger than a man's hand. It had large, intelligent green eyes with rectangular pupils, and it blinked slowly at the stunned audience. "Behold," the tiny creature said, its voice high-pitched but filled with an intellect so vast and profound it made their minds ache. "A Galvan from the planet Galvan Prime. In your primitive lexicon, you might call me gray matter." Tsunade stared, her jaw slack. Danzo's visible eye was wide with naked, undisguised avarice. "The strategic deficiencies in your arguments are, to be frank, astounding," gray matter continued, pacing back and forth on the table. "Councilman Hori's plan of appeasement has a 97.4% chance of resulting in planetary subjugation within one solar cycle. Elder Kaharu's proposal of isolationism ignores the fact that Zarkon's forces possess long-range scanning technology that makes hiding impossible." And Danzo, gray matter stopped and looked directly at the old man. "Your plan to weaponize the Kinjin tricks is PR, edicated on the false assumption that it is merely a piece of hardware. The Kinjin tricks is a bioenergetic symbiotic device keyed directly to Uzumaki's unique chakra signature, which itself is mutated by the presence of the nine-tailed fox. Attempting to remove it would trigger a failsafe that would either detonate with the force of 1,000 paper bombs or, more likely, phase the device and its host into a pocket dimension from which he would never return. Your root scientists would be studying an empty stump. Furthermore, the genetic codes within are not mere data, they are sentient life forms in microcosm. You cannot control them any more than you can control a hurricane. You are, in essence, a caveman trying to operate a starship by hitting it with a rock. The results would be suboptimal." The tiny alien fixed his gaze on the entire council. "The only logical course of action is a proactive defense. We must treat Princess Lyravala as what she is, our single greatest source of intelligence and our first potential ally in a war that has already begun. We must centralize our defense, prepare our forces, and use my unique talents to analyze the alien technology and devise countermeasures. Anything else is suicide." With a final, dramatic flash of red light, gray matter was gone, and Naruto stood in his place, looking slightly dizzy. "So," he said, his normal voice returning. "Any more stupid ideas?" The council chamber was silent. They were utterly, completely defeated. They had been outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and overpowered by the one person in the room they had never taken seriously. Naruto walked over to stand beside Tsunade again. He looked them all in the eye, one by one. "Princess Lyravala is not a prisoner or a weapon. She is a guest of Konoha. And she is under my personal protection. Anyone who tries to harm her or use her will have to go through me. And my 10 friends." He held up the Kinjin tricks. The threat was unmistakable. Before anyone could respond, a high-pitched whine filled the room. The communication lacrima on the wall, used for contacting other villages, flared to life with a blinding white light. A wave of psychic energy washed over them. And a voice echoed in their minds. A voice that was cold, arrogant, and dripping with absolute power. "Primitives of the world you call Earth," the voice boomed, a telepathic broadcast that was simultaneously hitting every mind on the planet. "I am Warlord Zarkon, a fugitive of the Xylurian Empire. The traitor Lyravala has taken refuge on your insignificant mudball. This is an act of war against my empire. You have 24 of your planetary rotations to deliver her to my coordinates. Refuse, and I will personally oversee the orbital bombardment that will turn your world's surface to glass. The choice is yours. The light faded, leaving the council in stunned, terrified silence. The abstract threat was now a concrete ultimatum. They all looked at Naruto, their expressions a mixture of fear, horror, and a new, grudging respect. He had been right. The war was already here. Far away, in a realm of perfect order, a being made of shifting timelines and pure mathematics noted the event. The spontaneous generation of a hyper-evolved Galvan mind on a primitive CLASS-3 planet had created a causal anomaly, a ripple in the fabric of spacetime that could not be ignored. And observe, R of the Chronomancers turned its faceless gaze towards Earth. The anomaly known as Naruto Uzumaki had just been upgraded from a person of interest to a potential threat to temporal stability. An intervention would soon be necessary. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Warlord's Fist. The 24 hours that followed Zarkon's ultimatum were the longest in Konoha's history. The festive lanterns and merchant stalls vanished overnight, replaced by the grim reality of a village mobilizing for war. The air, once filled with laughter and music, now hummed with a tense, nervous energy. Squads of Chunin and Jonin moved through the streets with silent, purposeful strides, reinforcing barricades and setting up triage centers in public squares. The faces of the civilians were a mixture of fear and a stubborn, ingrained resilience born from surviving decades of shinobi warfare. They were scared, but they were not broken. At the center of this maelstrom was a strange pocket of calm. On the roof of the Hokage Tower, Naruto and Lyra stood side by side, watching the village prepare for a battle it had not asked for. Lyra had been given a simple, practical set of shinobi fatigues, her damaged armor having been taken for analysis. The dark green fabric stood in stark contrast to her golden skin and crimson hair, making her look even more otherworldly. Her gaze was fixed on the Anbu squad's weaving intricate patterns of explosive tags and barrier seals across the village walls. "This is my fault," she said, her voice barely a whisper above the wind. "All of this, the fear in your people's eyes, the homes that will be destroyed, the lives that will be lost, they are all my burden to bear." "No," Naruto said, his own eyes tracing the path of Asuma Sarutobi's team as they took up a defensive position near the main gate. "This isn't on you, it's on him. On Zarkon. You're just the excuse he's using." He turned to look at her, his expression more serious than she had ever seen it. "My whole life, I've been an excuse for people to hate something they couldn't understand. I know the difference between the cage and the creature inside it. You didn't ask for any of this. But I brought it to your doorstep," she insisted, her emerald eyes shining with unshed tears of guilt. "My fight has become your fight." "Yeah, it has," Naruto agreed, and he reached out, his hand gently closing over her wrist, just above the gauntlet she still wore. His touch was warm and steady. "And I'm glad it is. I'd rather fight for a person than for a piece of dirt or a flag. We're going to get through this together." Lyra looked down at his hand, then up at his face. She saw no trace of doubt in his blue eyes, only a fierce, unwavering resolve. He wasn't a boy playing with a powerful toy anymore. He was a man making a stand. She gave him a small, grateful smile and squeezed his hand back. In that simple, shared touch, an unspoken alliance was sealed. They were no longer a shinobi and a princess. They were partners. Below them, in the command center, Tsunade was orchestrating the defense with the fury of a cornered lioness. Maps were spread across the table, and she barked orders at a speed that left most of the Chunin aides dizzy. "Guy, Kurenai, Asuma, your teams are on the outer perimeter. Your job is to engage and delay. I want a report on their weapons and tactics the second you make contact. Kakashi, you and your hounds are on mobile reserve. You go where the fighting is thickest." "Shikaku," she said, turning to the lazy but brilliant head of the Nara clan, "I want you plugged into our communication network. I need you to be my brain. Find patterns, exploit weaknesses." Shikaku Nara gave a tired sigh. "What a drag, fighting aliens before I've even had my morning tea." But his eyes were sharp, already calculating probabilities. The final hour of the countdown ticked away with agonizing slowness. The entire village held its breath. Then, as the sun reached its zenith, it happened. It did not begin with a sound, but with a shadow. A vast, cross-shaped darkness fell over Konoha, eclipsing the sun and plunging the village into an unnatural twilight. Every head, shinobi and civilian alike, turned upwards. Tearing through the clouds was a vessel of terrifying scale and brutalist design. It was a kilometer-long behemoth of gunmetal gray armor and menacing red lights, shaped like a monstrous hammerhead. This was the Tyrant's Will, Zarkon's flagship. It hung in the sky above them, a silent, oppressive testament to the power they now faced. By the first, Jiraiya muttered from his perch on the Hokage monument. His expression grim. Hatchways opened along the flagship's belly, and a swarm of smaller craft descended. They were sleek, insectoid fighters, moving with a speed and agility that defied physics. They screamed through the air, their engines leaving trails of ionic fire. All units. Tsunade's voice boomed over the communication system, magically amplified to reach every corner of the village. Engage. Quote, the battle for Konoha began. The alien fighters opened fire, unleashing volleys of concentrated plasma that struck the village's outer barrier seals. The air izzled and cracked as blue chakra shields flared to life, straining under the onslaught. The initial bombardment was a feint, a tactic to draw their attention to the sky. The real attack came from below. From the bellies of the fighters. Troops descended on columns of blue light, teleportation beams. One moment the streets were empty, the next they were filled with Zarkon's elite soldiers. They were clad in sleek, black armor that covered them from head to toe, their faces hidden behind reflective visors. They moved with disciplined precision, forming firing lines and advancing through the streets. Their plasma rifles spitting bolts of crimson energy that chewed through stone and wood alike. The shinobi met them head-on. It was a chaotic, brutal clash of two completely different philosophies of war. Kiba and Akamaru, a whirlwind of fang and claw, tore into a squad of soldiers, only to be thrown back when the soldiers' armor flared with a personal energy shield. Shino's Kikaichu insects swarmed a trooper, but were incinerated by a wave of thermal energy from his suit. Hinata's gentle fist, designed to strike a chakra network, was useless against the armored combatants who had none. Their armor is shielded, Asuma yelled into his communicator, dodging a volley of plasma fire. Conventional taijutsu is ineffective. Aim for the joints or the visor. On another front, Might Guy was a green hurricane of motion. Leaf Hurricane, he roared, his powerful kicks moving faster than the troopers' targeting systems could track. He couldn't break their shields with a single blow, but his sheer, relentless speed allowed him to batter them down through attrition, his fists and feet a blur of concussive impacts. Naruto and Lyra watched the first wave unfold from the tower roof. His soldiers are legionaries, Lyra said, her voice tight with a mixture of hatred and tactical analysis. Their shields can take a few direct hits, but they need time to recharge. Their rifles are powerful, but have a low rate of fire. Their greatest weakness is their rigid tactics. They fight as a unit. Break their formation, and they become vulnerable. Break formation. Got it. Naruto's expression was set. He slapped the faceplate of the Kinjin-trix. Time to go to work. He chose XLR8. In a green flash, he was a blue and black streak, a living blur that shot off the tower roof. He was a phantom on the battlefield. He moved so fast that the legionaries seemed to be standing still. He ran past a squad, and in his wake, all of their rifles were dismantled, their components scattered across the street before they even realized he was there. He appeared beside a group of terrified civilians cornered in an alley, scooping them up and depositing them in a shelter a half-mile away in the span of 3 seconds. He was a one-man communication and rescue unit, his rapid-fire voice snapping tactical updates and enemy positions over the comms faster than the central command could process them. Quote, squad of heavies advancing on the west gate. Shields are stronger. Guy-sensei, you're closest. Naruto. Kakashi's voice crackled over the radio. Is that you? No time to talk, sensei. They're adapting, changing tactics. He saw a squadron of the insectoid fighters dive bombing the Hokage monument. He didn't hesitate. He ran straight up the side of the cliff face, defying gravity. As he ran, he twisted the dial on the omnitrix symbol on his chest. Even at super speed, the instinct was there. He leapt from the fourth Hokage's stone head, and in midair, a flash of green light enveloped him. He was no longer XLR8. He was Stinkfly, a large, insectoid creature with 4 stalk eyes, a sharp stinger, and large, translucent wings. He beat his wings, hovering in the air, and fired a high-pressure stream of thick, viscous goo from his mouth. The slime splattered across the cockpits of the lead fighters. Their pilots, blinded, lost control and crashed into each other in a series of fiery explosions. The remaining fighters broke off, their programming unable to cope with such a bizarre, unexpected attack. He didn't have time to celebrate. A massive, 10-foot-tall robot, a walking tank armed with Gatling plasma cannons, teleported into the middle of the main street, laying down a devastating field of fire that pinned down Kurenai's entire team. Naruto landed in an alley, transforming again. This time he chose 4 arms. He burst out of the alley, a 10-foot-tall engine of destruction, and charged the robot head-on. Plasma bolts sizzled against his thick, red hide. He ignored them. He reached the robot, grabbed its cannon arms with his upper set of hands, and used his lower set to punch straight through its chest plating. He ripped out a handful of circuits and wires, and the machine collapsed, twitching and sparking. From the sky, Lyra was a warrior angel. She flew not with wings, but by generating a field of stellar energy around her that defied gravity. Her crimson hair streamed behind her like a banner. She was a bolt of living green light, firing star bolts with pinpoint accuracy. She knew Zarkon's forces. She targeted their commanders, breaking their chain of command. She blasted their heavy weapon emplacements, creating openings for the shinobi on the ground. She and Naruto were a 2-person army, systematically dismantling the invasion with a synergy that left both their allies and enemies in awe. For an hour, the battle raged. Konoha's shinobi, with their unorthodox techniques and ferocious will to protect their home, were proving to be a far more difficult challenge than Zarkon had anticipated. They were taking casualties, but they were holding the line. Aboard the Tyrant's Will, Zarkon watched the battle on his command throne's viewscreen, his expression one of mild annoyance. The primitives are more resilient than the initial scans suggested, he said, his voice a low, metallic rasp. Commander Korb, their resistance is becoming tiresome. Deploy the Annihilator. My lord, the second in command, a hulking, 4-eyed alien, stammered. The Annihilator protocol is for planetary bombardment, not a surgical strike. The collateral damage will be acceptable, Zarkon finished, his glowing red eyes narrowing. And retrieve the princess. I am growing impatient. Back in Konoha, a new threat emerged. A large section of the Tyrant's Will's hull opened up, and a massive cannon descended. It hummed, gathering an amount of energy that made the very air vibrate. A sphere of swirling, chaotic energy, black streaked with purple lightning, began to form at its tip. Lyra's blood ran cold. No, the Annihilator cannon. It can wipe out an entire city in a single blast. Down below, Naruto, currently in his diamond head form, had just finished erecting a massive crystal wall to protect the hospital. He saw the cannon and felt the terrifying energy it was gathering. The Kinjin tricks pulsed with a warning. This was a threat on another level. We have to stop that thing. He yelled, his voice a chorus of crystalline chimes. There's no time to get up there. Lyra shouted back from the air, her face pale. The shields on that flagship are too strong for my star bolts alone. Shikaku's voice suddenly cut through the comms. Naruto, the princess, your abilities are unpredictable. Theirs are based on technology. Their shields are designed to disperse focused energy attacks. A wide-angle attack, or one with a strange energy signature, might be able to bypass them. It's a long shot, but it's the only shot we have. Naruto looked at Lyra, an idea forming in his crystalline mind. A desperate, insane plan born from Shikaku's words. Lyra, get down here. I need your power. She didn't question him. She dove towards him, landing gracefully beside the massive Petrosapian. What's the plan? She asked, her eyes fixed on the growing sphere of doom in the sky. Their shields can block energy, but can they block solid matter? Diamond Head said, I'm going to create a lens. A massive, perfect crystal. I need you to pour every ounce of power you have into it. We'll focus it into a single beam. It'll be a combined energy type. Solid light. Maybe it'll be weird enough to get through. The feedback could kill me. She protested. I won't let it. He promised. He slammed both of his hands into the ground. A huge, multifaceted crystal, AP, perfect diamond prism the size of a house, erupted from the earth, pointing directly at the flagship. Now, Lyra closed her eyes. She held her hands out, palms facing the crystal. The air around her ignited with green fire. Stellar energy, the power of 1,000 suns, flowed from her body. It was a raw, untamed torrent of power that would have incinerated any normal being. The energy flowed into the crystal, which began to glow with an almost unbearable intensity. Diamond Head was at the base of the prism, his own body connected to it, trying to manage the insane energies flowing through it. Racks began to form along his crystalline skin from the strain. He could feel Lyra's life force pouring into the attack, and he gritted his teeth, reinforcing the crystal structure with his own will, his own power. It was a duet of destruction and creation. "It's ready," he roared. The annihilator cannon fired. A beam of pure, annihilating darkness shot down towards the village. At the exact same moment, Diamond Head fired back. A beam of solid, emerald light, a lance of pure, focused energy, erupted from the tip of the crystal prism and shot into the sky. The two beams met halfway. For a single, silent moment, there was no sound. Only light. An impossible, world-breaking light. The emerald beam, charged with stellar power and shaped by the bizarre properties of the titanite crystal, Pirk, edged through the dark energy of the annihilator beam. It continued its ascent, striking the flagship's shield. The shield flared, sputtering. The combined energy signature was something its programming could not classify. For a split second, the shield flickered and failed. The emerald lance slammed into the annihilator cannon itself. The resulting explosion was cataclysmic. A massive fireball erupted on the underside of the tyrant's will. The flagship shuddered violently, alarms blaring across its decks, audible even on the ground. The annihilator cannon was gone, and a huge, gaping wound had been torn in the ship's hull. Aboard the bridge, Commander Korb was thrown from his station. Shields are down 30%. Hull breach on decks 7 through 12. The main weapon is destroyed. Zarkon rose from his throne, his metallic fingers digging into the armrests, crushing them. For the first time, he felt something other than annoyance. It was a flicker of interest. He looked at the image of the crystal giant and the glowing princess on the screen. "Withdraw," he commanded. "All forces, withdraw." Down on the ground, the remaining legionaries and fighters disengaged, teleporting away or flying back to the crippled flagship. As suddenly as it had begun, the battle was over. The tyrant's will, smoking and damaged, slowly turned and vanished into the clouds. Victory. The crystal prism crumbled to dust. Diamond Head, flashing red, transformed back into Naruto. He collapsed to one knee, exhausted. Lyra fell to the ground, her energy completely spent, her skin pale. Naruto crawled over to her, helping her sit up. Cheers began to erupt across the village. They had done it. They had faced a threat from the stars and had won. Shinobi were hugging each other, raising their fists to the sky. But as Naruto and Lyra sat there, amidst the rubble of their victory, they looked around at the burning buildings, the wounded being carried to the hospital, and the looks of weary grief on the faces of those who had lost comrades. The cheering sounded distant, hollow. They had won the battle. But they both knew, with a certainty that chilled them to the bone, that the war had just begun. Hidden in the upper branches of a lone, surviving tree on a distant hill, a figure shimmered. The Chronomancer observer had recorded everything, the tactical cycling of alien forms, the spontaneo generation of a massive titanite structure, the fusion of celestial and crystalline energies. This was not a simple anomaly anymore. This was a nexus of causality, a being who was actively and violently rewriting the predictable flow of events on a planetary scale. The report it sent back to the heart of time was concise. Subject 010 has demonstrated rapid, exponential growth in strategic and power application. Conventional containment protocols are now insufficient. Recommend direct intervention. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. An alliance forged in fire. Victory was not a glorious sound. It was the whisper of wind through the skeletal frames of burned-out buildings. It was the rhythmic clang of hammers on wood as rebuilding efforts began, a sound that was both hopeful and heartbreakingly slow. It was the quiet, stifled weeping that echoed from the memorial stone, where new names had been hastily carved. Konoha had won, but the victory felt hollow, leaving a scar not just on the village, but on its soul. In the days that followed Zarkon's failed strike, Naruto was not a hero. He was a phantom haunting the edges of the recovery. He spent hours with the volunteer corps, his shadow clones moving rubble and raising support beams with a tireless, manic energy that spoke more of guilt than of civic duty. He saw the faces of the shinobi he'd fought alongside now lying in the hospital. Their bodies covered in strange plasma burns that even Tsunade's most advanced medical jutsu struggled to heal. He saw the families huddled in emergency shelters, their homes turned to glass and ash. He had saved them, but he had also been the magnet that drew the storm. The weight of it was a physical thing, a pressure in his chest that made it hard to breathe. He found Lyra in the hospital's heavily guarded VIP wing. Her physical wounds were healing quickly under the care of Konoha's best medics, but the fatigue went deeper than her flesh. She stood by the window, looking out at the damaged village. Her reflection in the glass a pale, ghostly image. "I have been counting," she said without turning as he entered. 112 homes destroyed. 47 shinobi seriously wounded. 12 dead. Her voice was flat, each number a self-inflicted wound. A modest price for a planetary defense, Zarkon's tacticians would say. A successful probe with acceptable losses. They weren't acceptable losses, Naruto said, his voice raw. He stood beside her at the window. They were people, sensei, friends. A ramen chef from down my street who used to give me extra noodles. "I know," she whispered. She finally turned to look at him, her emerald eyes swimming with a guilt so profound it threatened to drown her. "And their blood is on my hands. I am the reason Zarkon came here." "You keep saying that, and you're wrong every time," he said, his frustration aimed not at her, but at the injustice of it all. "You think if you weren't here, he would have just left this planet alone. Guys like him are never satisfied. They don't stop until everything belongs to them. You didn't start this war, Lyra. You just showed us it was already happening." She wanted to argue, too. Hold on to the guilt because it was the only thing that felt right, but the conviction in his eyes stopped her. He truly believed it. He was absolving her of a sin she felt she had committed, and the gesture was so simple, so pure, that it broke through her regal composure. A single tear traced a path down her golden cheek. He instinctively reached up and wiped it away with his thumb, his touch surprisingly gentle. The moment hung in the air between them, fragile and unspoken. The fragile peace was shattered by the arrival of the outside world. Zarkon's broadcast had not been limited to the Land of Fire. It had been a global announcement, a declaration that their planet was now a battlefield. The other great shinobi villages, who had for so long been Konoha's rivals and occasional allies, responded not with offers of support, but with fear and accusation. Hawks arrived carrying messages sealed with the cage's official stamps. The Raikage of Kumogakure, a man known for his explosive temper, sent a scroll that practically vibrated with rage, demanding that Konoha surrender the alien weapon and the off-world catalyst, before his actions brought the wrath of the heavens down upon them all. The Tsuchikage of Iwagakure's message was more cunning but no less hostile, filled with veiled threats and insinuations that Konoha was foolishly hoarding a power it couldn't control. The Mizukage of Kurigakure, still rebuilding from its own bloody civil war, sent a plea for de-escalation, which was just a polite way of asking Konoha to sacrifice itself for the good of the world. The only message that wasn't an outright condemnation came from Sunagakure. It was from Gaara. The formal text spoke of concern and the need for a unified response, but Naruto could read between the lines. It was a cautious, tentative offer of dialogue from someone who knew what it was like to be treated as a monster. "They want a summit," Tsunade said, slamming the Raikage's scroll down on her desk. She, Naruto, Jiraiya, and a recovered Lyra were in the Hokage's office, the air thick with tension. An emergency meeting of the Five Cage. "They want to put Konoha on trial. They're scared," Jiraiya said, his usual levity gone. "And scared people do stupid things. They see us as the source of the problem because it's easier than admitting they're powerless against the real threat." "So what do we do?" Naruto asked, looking at Tsunade. "We can't just give them what they want." "No, we won't," Tsunade said, her eyes flashing with the fire of the first Hokage. "I will not sacrifice two people who so UGHTR protection just to appease a pack of cowards. I will meet with them. I will make them see reason. But Naruto could see the strain on her face. Konoha was strong, but it could not stand against the entire world. Not alone. That night, the weight of it all became too much for Naruto. He couldn't sleep. The faces of the fallen shinobi, the accusatory words of the cage, the terrifying power. Coiled on his wrist, it was a poison seeping into his thoughts. He found himself on the training grounds where Team 7 had first taken their bell test, the three familiar posts standing like lonely sentinels in the moonlight. He wasn't surprised when Lyra found him there. She moved with a quiet grace that was almost as silent as his own shinobi training. She sat beside him on the cool grass, her sense a comforting anchor in his turbulent thoughts. In my culture, we do not mourn our dead with silence, she said softly, breaking the quiet. We tell their stories, we sing their songs of battle, so that their spirit may inspire those who still fight. It is our way of keeping them alive. We have a stone with their names on it, Naruto said, his voice thick. Sometimes I feel like I'm going to be the reason half the village ends up on that stone. No, she said firmly, her voice leaving no room for his self-pity. You are the reason this village still stands. I saw you during the battle. You were more than just a wielder of the Kinjin tricks. You were a leader, a symbol. You were their hope. She looked at the watch on his wrist, her expression a mixture of awe and trepidation. That device, it is more than just a weapon, isn't it? When our energies merged, I felt it. A sense of history, a power that was ancient beyond comprehension. Naruto nodded, looking down at the sleek metal. When I use it, I get flashes. Instincts. It's like a piece of them is still inside. The Xylurian legends speak of beings called the Celestials, she explained, her voice taking on the hushed tone of one reciting scripture. They were said to be the first beings, weavers of reality who forged the stars from primordial chaos. The stories say they fought a great war against the Great Nothing. A darkness that sought to unmake all of creation. To fight it, they created artifacts of immense power, each one keyed to the fundamental forces of the universe. The Kinjin tricks, it matches the description of the anvil of life. A device said to hold the very essence of 1,000 warrior species. A darkness that sought to unmake creation. The words sent a shiver down Naruto's spine. What happened to them? The Celestials. Lyra's expression grew somber. They won. But the cost was everything. They vanished from the universe, leaving only their legends and their weapons behind. Naruto stared at the Kinjin tricks, his mind reeling. He was wearing a weapon of the gods. A tool used to fight a cosmic horror. The thought was so immense, so terrifying, that his head began to spin. He reached out and touched the faceplate. His mind filled with the memory of the power that had surged through him, the feeling of Lyra's stellar energy merging with his own. That was a mistake. The moment his fingers made contact, the power surge from that battle, which had been lying dormant in the watch's core, finally found a release. The faceplate flashed, not green or red, but a blinding, stark white. Naruto's world dissolved. He was no longer in Konoha. He was floating in a cold, silent void of absolute nothingness. There were no stars, no light, no sound. Below him was a vast, crystalline lattice. A web of light that stretched to infinity, the seal. And it was fractured, shattered, with great cracks marring its perfect surface. From those cracks, a non-substance was bleeding through. It was not darkness, for darkness is merely the absence of light. This was an active, malevolent anti-existence. He felt a presence, a mind. It was ancient, patient, and utterly, profoundly hungry. It had no form, but he perceived it as a great, unblinking eye made of static and television snow, a hole in reality that promised only oblivion. It turned its attention to him, and it spoke, not in words, but in pure, unfiltered concepts fed directly into his soul. It showed him images of his friends turning to dust. It showed him the sun winking out of existence. It showed him the very concept of color and sound being eaten, leaving behind a silent, gray canvas. It promised an end to all things, an end to pain, to struggle, to love, to hope, not as a tragedy, but as a glorious, final perfection. The ultimate piece of non-being. The Void Weaver. The name slammed into his consciousness with the force of a physical blow. This was the Great Nothing. This was the enemy the Celestials had sacrificed themselves to stop. And the Kinjin-trix was not a weapon. It was a lock. It was the plug in the dam holding back an ocean of oblivion. And every time he used its power, the lock weakened. The dam cracked. He screamed, a raw, silent scream that had no sound in the void. Naruto. He was back on the training ground, Lyra's hands on his shoulders, her face a mask of terror. He was shaking violently, his skin clammy and pale, his eyes wide with a horror she could not comprehend. What did you see? She begged. What happened? He couldn't speak. He could only gasp for air, the terrifying promise of the Void Weaver echoing in his soul. He now knew the truth. This wasn't a fight he could win. It was a disaster he could only postpone. And the tool he was using to save his world was the very thing that would eventually doom the universe. The Cage Summit was a disaster. It was held via a secure, long-range communication jutsu that projected their holographic images into the center of Konoha's council chamber. The fourth Raikage was a mountain of muscle and belligerence, his voice a constant roar. Onoki, the third Tsuchikage, floated in his seat, his age belying a sharp, calculating mind. Mei Terumi, the fifth Mizukage, was poised and diplomatic, but her smiles did not reach her eyes. And then there was Gaara, the new Kazekage of Suna, his expression as impassive as ever, but his eyes holding a flicker of understanding. Tsunade argued with the force of a hurricane, laying out the strategic necessity of a united front. Jiraiya presented intelligence on Zarkon's empire, emphasizing that this was a threat to them all. But it was no use. This is a problem of your own making, Tsunade. The Raikage bellowed, slamming his fist on the table in front of him. Your Jinchuriki has brought this curse upon us all. He is an unstable weapon, and now he has attracted the attention of forces we cannot hope to fight. You will hand him and the alien girl over, or Kumo will consider Konoha an enemy nation. The Raikage is correct, Onoki said, steepling his fingers. While his methods are crude, his logic is sound. Konoha cannot be allowed to jeopardize global security for the sake of two individuals. The Mizukage sighed. We sympathize with your position, Lady Hokage. But we must consider the greater good. The consensus of the great nations is clear. Tsunade looked at Gaara, her last hope. Kazekage, surely you do not agree with this madness. Gaara was silent for a long moment, his turquoise eyes moving from Tsunade to where Naruto stood in the corner of the room, watching the proceedings. I understand what it means to be feared for a power you did not choose, he said, his voice a low rasp. However, Suna is still recovering from the last war. We do not have the strength to fight a galactic empire. I cannot ask my people to die for Konoha's guest. He did not vote against them, but his abstention was just as damning. The verdict was unanimous. Konoha was alone. The summit ended, the holograms vanishing, leaving Tsunade and Naruto in a chamber that felt colder and more oppressive than ever. They were outcasts on their own planet. That evening, Naruto and Lyra stood on the fourth Hokage's head. The same place he had met with Jiraiya what felt like a lifetime ago. The village below was a tapestry of light and shadow, beautiful and fragile. They had just come from Tsunade's office, where she had made it clear that despite the world's condemnation, she would not turn them over. But her defiance came at the cost of utter isolation. They hate me, Naruto said, his voice devoid of its usual energy. The whole world. They look at me and all they see is a monster, a weapon that's going to get them all killed. Then they are fools, Lyra said fiercely, moving to stand in front of him. They are blind. They do not see the boy who stood against his own leaders for a stranger. They do not see the man who took on a war machine to protect his home. It doesn't matter what they see, he said, looking down at his hands. We're alone, Lyra. It's just us and Konoha against a galactic empire, our own planet. And, he trailed off, the horrifying vision of the Void Weaver flashing in his mind. He couldn't bring himself to tell her about that. Not yet. So we are alone, she said, her voice soft but unyielding. She reached out and took his hands in hers. Her skin was warm, her grip firm. My entire world was taken from me. My family, my people, they are gone or enslaved. For a long time, I was truly alone. But I am not alone anymore. Naruto looked up, his eyes meeting hers. In her gaze, he saw not pity, but a profound understanding. She saw him. Not the Jinchuriki, not the hero, not the wielder of the god weapon. Just Naruto, the outcast, the one who understood, and in that moment, everything became clear. The political maneuvering, the fear of the other villages, the condemnation, it was all just noise. The only thing that mattered was the person standing in front of him. The one who had seen him at his most powerful and his most broken, and had not flinched. The world had drawn a line in the sand, placing them both on the other side. Fine, when you become a shinobi of Konoha, he said, his voice quiet but clear, you pledge your life to the village. You become a part of its family, its will. But they just tried to cast us out of that family. He took a deep breath. His heart pounding, but his resolve was like steel. So let's make our own family. Our own alliance. One that no council or cage can vote against. Lyra looked at him, her breath catching in her throat as she understood what he was saying. In my world, a marriage is a political tool, she said, her voice trembling slightly. A way to join houses, to secure power. I'm not talking about politics, Naruto said, his grip on her hands tightening. I'm talking about a promise. A pledge, that wherever you go, I go. Whatever you fight, I fight. They want to treat us like a force of nature that's going to destroy them. Then let's be one. An alliance of two. An unbreakable alliance. He looked her dead in the eye, his soul bare. Lyravala, will you marry me? Tears welled in her eyes. But this time they were not of guilt or sorrow. They were of a fierce, defiant joy. She had been a princess running from a forced marriage that would have been her cage. And now, she was being offered a marriage that would be her shield, her fortress, her home. Yes, Naruto Uzumaki, she said, a brilliant, radiant smile breaking through the tears. I will. He pulled her into a hug. And for the first time since the star fell in the forest of death, he felt a sense of peace. The world could hate them. The universe could threaten them. But they were not alone. They had each other. An alliance forged not in a council room, but in the heart of battle, sealed under the silent watch of the stars. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Warlord's Gambit. In the wake of their shared decision, a strange and fragile peace settled over Naruto and Lyra. Their engagement was not announced with any formal ceremony, it was a quiet, unspoken fact that radiated from them. The shinobi of Konoha, perceptive as they were, saw the change. They saw the way the alien princess and their own outcast Jinchuriki moved in sync, trained together, and stood as a united front in council meetings. As an alliance the village had not sanctioned, but one they instinctively understood and respected. It was a partnership forged in the defense of their homes, and that was a language every shinobi understood. Their training sessions became a thing of legend. Lyra, with her innate understanding of energy manipulation, taught Naruto how to feel the subtle flows of power around him, honing his senses beyond the crude, overwhelming input of the Nine Tails. In turn, Naruto's transformations provided her with the ultimate sparring partner. One day she would be honing her reflexes against the blinding speed of XLR8. The next she would test the power of her star bolts against the nigh indestructible hide of Diamond Head. They learned each other's rhythms, anticipated each other's moves, their fighting styles slowly merging into a seamless, deadly dance. It was during one such session, in the blasted clearing where Lyra's ship had once crashed, that their fragile peace was shattered. Naruto, in his brutish four-arms form, was locked in a mock grapple with Lyra, who was encased in a shimmering green aura of stellar energy. He was trying to teach her about leverage, while she was trying to teach him that raw strength meant little against focused power. Suddenly, a plume of smoke erupted in the center of the clearing. It was not the smoke of a fire, but the distinct, sulphurous cloud of a toad summoning. But it was wrong. It was weak, dissipated. Out of the smoke stumbled a small, green toad, no bigger than Naruto's fist. It was covered in burns and deep gashes, and one of its legs was bent at a sickening angle. It was Gamatatsu's younger brother, Gamataro. The toad collapsed, its chest heaving. Naruto! It croaked, its voice a weak rasp. Master Jiraiya! A trap! Ambush! Naruto immediately timed out, the red flash of light leaving him in his human form. He knelt beside the wounded toad, his heart seizing with a cold dread. What happened? Where is he? He was tracking, Aled, on Zarkon's forces. In the land of rain, the toad gasped. They were waiting for him. Not soldiers, something else. Faster, stronger. They knew his techniques. We were overwhelmed. He told me to flee, to warn you, with a final shuddering breath. The little toad went still. Lyra was at his side in an instant, her hand on his shoulder. Naruto. He didn't hear her. He was staring at the small, dead creature. The implication of its message crashing down on him like a mountain. Jiraiya. The pervy sage, the toad sage, one of the legendary Sannin. Defeated. Captured. The idea was so preposterous, so impossible, that his mind refused to accept it. But the proof lay dead in the grass before him. Before he could even process the grief and rage, the air in front of them shimmered with heat. A column of red light descended from the sky, resolving into a perfect, three-dimensional hologram. It was Warlord Zarkon. He sat upon his throne aboard the bridge of his ship, looking as imperious and arrogant as ever. Beside his throne, suspended in a crackling energy field, was Jiraiya. The Sannin was unconscious, his face bruised and his clothes torn, but he was alive. Naruto Uzumaki, Zarkon's synthesized voice boomed, devoid of any emotion. As you can see, I have acquired something of yours. A primitive, but surprisingly resilient, specimen. Naruto surged to his feet, his fists clenched, his chakra flaring with raw, murderous intent. Zarkon, you coward. Let him go. Cowardice is a luxury I cannot afford, Zarkon replied calmly. Strategy, however, is a tool I wield with precision. Your direct assault on my forces failed. So I have altered my approach. I am targeting your emotional vulnerabilities. A far more effective method of warfare, I am finding. The hologram of Jiraiya flickered. I have no desire to engage in another protracted, costly battle with your tenacious little world. So I offer you a proposition. A duel, you and me, one-on-one. A battle of champions to decide the fate of this conflict. If you win, I will release your mentor and my fleet will withdraw from this star system permanently. If I win, you will surrender yourself, the princess, and the Kinjintrix to me, and your planet will be spared. Quote, you think I'd trust you? Naruto spat. You have no choice, Zarkon said. The duel will take place aboard my flagship, the Zenith. You will come alone. If I detect any other vessels, any other shinobi, any hint of a trick, your mentor will be executed, and I will commence the orbital bombardment we discussed. You have 1 hour to decide. The hologram vanished, leaving behind an echoing silence. It's a trap, Lyra said immediately, her voice sharp and certain. He was humiliated in a direct battle of strength. Now he seeks to control the terms of engagement. He will not fight you fairly. Quote, I know, Naruto said, his voice a low growl. But the image of Jiraiya, helpless and defeated, was burned into his mind. He had to go. There was no other option. In the Hokage's office, the atmosphere was funereal. Tsunade, after hearing the news, had forbidden it. Absolutely. She would not send Naruto, the village's greatest asset and a boy she considered a surrogate grandson, into the lion's den. I'll send a diplomatic team. I'll offer him anything he wants, a ransom, anything. She argued, pacing furiously. He doesn't want a ransom, Tsunade, Shikaku Nara said from the corner, where he had been summoned. He wants Naruto and the watch. This is a targeted assassination attempt disguised as a duel. To send Naruto is to send him to his death. I have to go, Naruto said, his voice cutting through their arguments. He looked at Tsunade, his eyes filled with a hard resolve she hadn't seen since the day he'd mastered the Rasengan. He's my master, my family. I'm not leaving him there. Quote, this isn't about courage, Naruto, it's about suicide. Tsunade roared. No, it's about strategy, Naruto shot back, surprising them all. He turned to Shikaku. He's right. It's a trap. Zarkon is expecting me to be the same dumb knucklehead who charges in without a plan. That's how we're going to beat him. By not being what he expects. He leaned over the table, his gaze intense. Shikaku, I need you. Lyra, you've been on ships like his. I need to know everything. The layout, the power sources, the security protocols. Zarkon thinks he's writing the rules for this fight. But he's not. I am. For the next 45 minutes, they worked with a desperate, focused intensity. Lyra sketched a rough schematic of a standard Imperial battlecruiser, pointing out the typical locations of the bridge. The engine room, and the brig. Shikaku, his mind working at lightning speed, formulated a dozen different scenarios, predicting Zarkon's likely traps and Naruto's potential counters. Naruto absorbed it all, asking sharp, insightful questions. He wasn't thinking like a brawler anymore. He was thinking like a general. His arrogance is his weakness, Shikaku concluded. A thin trail of smoke rising from his cigarette. He believes he has accounted for all your abilities. He will have countermeasures for the aliens he's already seen. Your only chance is the element of surprise. Do something he can't possibly predict. Don't worry, Naruto said, a grim smile on his face as he looked at the Kinjin tricks. I'm full of surprises. He stood on the roof of the Hokage Tower, Lyra beside him. He had agreed to Zarkon's terms. A column of red light descended, the same teleportation beam Zarkon's soldiers had used. This is insane, Lyra whispered, her hand gripping his arm. Let me come with you. No, he said, his voice gentle but firm. This is my fight, but I need you here. If I'm not back in 2 hours, get everyone you can underground. And be ready to run. He gave her a quick, hard hug. I'll be back, I promise. He stepped into the beam. The world dissolved into red light. He rematerialized in a vast, cavernous chamber. It was the throne room of the Zenith. A monument to martial power and tyrannical ego. The walls were polished black metal, the ceiling was impossibly high, and at the far end, on a raised dais, sat Zarkon on his throne. The room was lined with his elite guards. A silent, armored gallery of spectators. So, the boy displays courage, Zarkon said, his voice echoing in the chamber. I am impressed. Where is he? Naruto demanded, his eyes scanning the room. He is safe. For now, Zarkon said as he rose from his throne. He was even more imposing in person, a giant of a man encased in ornate, powerful battle armor. Let us conclude our business. The duel began. Zarkon was a terrifying opponent. He was not just a brute, he was a master combatant, his movements a blur of speed and precision. He wielded a massive energy. Why halberd that could change its shape at his command. Naruto transformed into 4 arms, hoping to overpower him with brute strength. Zarkon just smiled, and the gravity plating in the floor activated. Naruto suddenly felt like he weighed 10 tons, his movements becoming slow and sluggish. Zarkon danced around him, his halberd leaving deep, sizzling gashes in the Tetraman's thick hide. Naruto switched tactics. Transforming into Diamond Head, he fired a volley of sharp crystal shards. Zarkon's armor flared with an energy shield that deflected them effortlessly. Then, high-frequency sonic emitters descended from the ceiling, bathing the room in a sound that was agony to Naruto's crystalline form. Cracks spread across his body, and he was forced to revert to human form, his ears ringing. As you can see, I have done my research. Zarkon gloated, stalking towards him. Your brute force is useless against my gravity fields. Your projectiles are meaningless against my shields. Your fire base, D form would be instantly extinguished by my ship's suppression systems. You have nothing left. You are a one-trick pony, and I have learned your trick. He was right. Naruto was on the defensive, dodging and weaving, barely staying ahead of Zarkon's relentless assault. He was being systematically dismantled, just as Shikaku had predicted. He needed something new, something Zarkon couldn't have planned for. He ducked behind a massive pillar, the halberd cleaving through it and sending sparks flying. He was running out of time. He looked at the watch, scrolling desperately through the familiar silhouettes. He needed a game changer. His fingers brushed past a form he'd never used before, one that felt different. The instincts that came with it were not of strength or speed, but of hunger. An electrical hunger. It was a huge risk. He had no idea what it did. Zarkon blasted the pillar apart, sending Naruto tumbling across the floor. The warlord stood over him, his halberd raised for the final blow. It is over, boy. Not yet, Naruto grunted, and slammed his hand down on the Kinjin tricks. The green flash was different this time. It crackled with bioelectricity. When it faded, a new being stood there. It was tall and slender, with black and white skin. 2 long, antennae-like plugs grew from its head, and its hands and feet ended in similar plug-like appendages. A single, round green eye stared out from its face. and the omnitrix symbol was on its chest. Zarkon paused, intrigued. Another new monster. It matters not. It will fall like all the others. He fired a powerful plasma blast from his gauntlet. The new creature didn't dodge. It simply raised its hand. The two prongs on its fingers opened like a pincer, and it caught the plasma bolt. A surge of green energy coursed up its arm, and the creature's eye glowed brighter. The name echoed in Naruto's new consciousness. Feedback. My turn, Feedback said, his voice a crackling, electric hum. He pointed his finger at Zarkon, and the plasma bolt he had just absorbed shot back out, amplified, twice as fast and 3 times as powerful. Zarkon was thrown back, his shield flaring and cracking under the unexpected assault. He stared in disbelief. You absorbed the attack. Feedback grinned, a predatory, electric arc. He pointed his head plugs at a nearby power conduit on the wall. A stream of raw energy flowed from the ship's systems into his body. He was a living battery, a capacitor of immense power. The tide of the battle turned instantly and brutally. Zarkon's energy weapons were now a liability, every blast just making Feedback stronger. He tried to engage in close combat, but Feedback was agile, and every time his energy halberd made contact, the creature would drain its power, leaving it inert. Zarkon, the master of technology, was being defeated by his own power source. Enraged and humiliated, Zarkon made his final, fatal mistake. He roared, channeling all the power from his armor's personal reactor into one final, overwhelming blast. If you hunger for energy, then choke on this. A massive, blinding beam of energy erupted from his chest, converging on Feedback. This was it, the moment Shikaku had predicted. Zarkon, in his arrogance, would overextend. Feedback didn't try to block it. He absorbed it all. His body swelled with an impossible amount of energy, green lightning arcing from his skin. The power was almost too much to hold. But he didn't fire it back at Zarkon. He turned, jamming the plugs on his fingers into the throne's control panel, directly into the ship's main power grid. You wanted to see a trick. Feedback roared, unleashing the entire, cataclysmic load of energy. Here's a new one. A wave of feedback, a logic bomb of pure, unprocessed energy, surged through the Zenith's systems. The lights flickered and died. A deep, groaning shudder ran through the entire ship. A new sound filled the air, a wailing, klaxon alarm. Warning. Primary core overload imminent. All hands abandon ship. Zarkon stared, his armor now powerless, his expression one of pure, unadulterated shock. He had lost. The elite guards, their loyalty erased by the primal fear of self-preservation, broke rank and ran for the escape pods. They ignored Zarkon's enraged screams for them to stand and fight. His authority, built on fear and power, had crumbled in an instant. Naruto reverted to human form, the transformation taking a massive toll. He was exhausted, but he was grinning. He ran from the throne room, leaving Zarkon standing alone amidst the chaos of his dying ship. Following Lyra's schematic from memory, he raced towards the brig. He blasted the cell door open with a quick Rasengan and found Jiraiya, conscious now and already working on his own restraints. Took you long enough, Gaki, Jiraiya grunted, a proud smile on his face. Come on, pervy sage, no time for reunions. They fought their way to the escape pod bay, the ship tearing itself apart around them. They Lao. NCHED a pod just as a series of explosions ripped through the Zenith's aft section. As their small craft rocketed away, they looked back to see the mighty flagship, crippled and burning, a testament to a warlord's hubris. Far across the galaxy, the unprecedented energy signature of the conductoid transformation, amplified by the near detonation of the Zenith's core, flared on a chronomancer's monitor like a supernova. The lead chronomancer observed the data, its timeless consciousness reaching a conclusion. The anomaly is no longer just a catalyst, it is an architect of cosmic-level events. It is forcing change upon the timeline. The observation phase is over. The time for correction is now. On Earth, in a hidden monastery nestled in the mountains, a cabal of robed figures felt the tremor in reality. They looked to the sky, and though they could not see it, they felt the distant death of Zarkon's ship. Their leader smiled, his eyes glowing with a faint, malevolent purple light. A great power has been unleashed. He whispered to his followers. The lock weakens. The weaver stirs. Our time is at hand. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. A celestial wedding and a timely threat. The return of Naruto and Jiraiya was not met with a grand parade or a formal ceremony. Konoha was still a village nursing its wounds, and the victory was too personal, too raw for performative celebration. Instead, their welcome was a far more meaningful thing. As their escape pod, guided in by Konoha's sensory division, touched down in the center of the village, shinobi and civilians alike emerged from their makeshift homes and rebuilding sites. They did not cheer. They simply stood and watched, a silent, village-wide expression of profound gratitude. In their eyes, Naruto saw not the monster or the weapon the other nations saw, but their champion, their protector, the boy who had gone into the heart of the enemy's fortress and emerged with one of their own. It was a welcome that spoke louder than any cheer could. The debriefing in Tsunade's office was a somber affair. Jiraiya, looking haggard but resolute, provided invaluable intelligence. Zarkon's authority was shattered. The destruction of his main weapon and the crippling of his flagship, coupled with the mass desertion of his elite guard, had sent a shockwave of instability through his conquered territories. He's vulnerable, Jiraiya concluded, pointing at a map of Zarkon's empire that Lyra had provided. His rivals, the factions he suppressed to build his empire, are going to start testing their cages. He'll be too busy putting out fires on his own doorstep to launch another full-scale assault on us. Not for a while, at least. It was a reprieve, hard-won and desperately needed. It was time to rebuild, to rearm, and to solidify their alliances. The first, and most important, of which was the one between Naruto and Lyra. We'll hold the ceremony in 1 week, Tsunade announced, her voice leaving no room for argument. She looked at Naruto and Lyra, a rare, genuine smile touching her lips. This isn't just about you two. This is a message to the elemental nations and to anyone else out there watching. Konoha is not broken. We are not afraid. We are building a new future, and we are forging new alliances. This wedding will be the foundation of that future. The week of preparations was a surreal blend of the mundane and the momentous. Naruto found himself being dragged shopping by a surprisingly enthusiastic Sakura and Ino, who insisted that even if he was marrying an alien princess, he couldn't do it in his tattered orange jumpsuit. They bickered endlessly over colors and styles, a slice of normalcy so profound that it felt more bizarre than any of his alien transformations. Lyra, meanwhile, was experiencing a cultural immersion unlike any other. She spent time with the Hyuga, fascinated by their concept of the gentle fist, which she likened to a form of precise, biological energy manipulation. She sparred with Guy and Lee, her warrior's spirit resonating with their passionate taijutsu. She found a kindred spirit in Shizune, the two of them bonding over the shared burden of trying to manage a powerful, often reckless, leader. She was not just a guest anymore, she was weaving herself into the fabric of the village. The most significant arrival was that of the Suna delegation. Gaara, the newly instated 5th Kazekage, arrived in person, accompanied by his siblings, Temari and Kankuro. His presence was a powerful political statement. While the other villages had condemned Konoha, Suna was standing with them. Gaara and Naruto met on the training grounds, the same place Naruto had first faced the terrifying power of Shukaku. Now, they met as equals. Your village looks upon you with respect, Gaara said, his voice the same quiet rasp. But the coldness in his eyes was gone, replaced by a calm, steady gaze. They do not fear you. It took a while, Naruto admitted, looking at his hands. A long, long while. To be a cage, Gaara continued, a hint of his own burden in his tone, is to be willing to become a monster for the sake of your people. But you have shown them that it is possible to have monstrous power. And still be a man. It is a lesson I am still trying to learn. He looked towards the village. Suna will honor our alliance. Your fight is our fight. It was the beginning of something new. A bond not born of treaties and political maneuvering, but of shared experience between two former outcasts who now found themselves leaders. The day of the wedding dawned clear and bright. The ceremony was held in the Nara clan's forest, a place of ancient trees and quiet, dappled sunlight. It was a compromise, a place of earthly nature that held a celestial feel. The guest list was small, intimate. Naruto's friends, the clan heads, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and the Suna delegation. It was a gathering of those who had stood by him, a family of choice. Naruto stood before a simple wooden archway, fidgeting with the collar of his new attire, a formal, dark blue shinobi uniform trimmed with the Uzumaki spiral in crimson. He looked respectable. It was a strange feeling. Then he saw her, and the breath caught in his throat. Lyra was walking towards him, escorted by Jiraiya, who looked impossibly proud. She wore a simple, elegant white gown, a gift from the Yamanaka clan, but it was adorned with a sash of deep purple Xylurian silk that shimmered with an inner light. Her crimson hair was woven with small, glowing star blossoms, a custom of her people. She was a breathtaking fusion of two worlds, a celestial princess grounded in the heart of their forest. Tsunade officiated, her voice foregoing its usual gruffness for one of soft solemnity. They did not exchange rings. Instead, they performed two rituals. The first was a shinobi tradition. They each cut their palms with a kunai and clasped hands, their blood mingling in a sacred pact. A bond of shared life and shared battle. The second was Xylurian. Lyra produced a small, crystalline seed. On my world, when two warriors form a bond, they plant a starwood seed, she explained, her voice clear and strong. It is said that as long as the tree lives and grows, so too will their alliance, its roots deep and its branches reaching for the stars. Together, they planted the seed in the soft earth before the archway. It was a promise of a future, of growth, of a life they would build together. Then by the power vested in me as fifth Hokage of Konohagagure, Tsunade declared, her voice ringing with emotion, I pronounce you husband and wife. An alliance forged, unbreakable and true. Naruto looked at Lyra, his wife, and she looked at him, her husband. A wide, brilliant grin spread across his face, and he pulled her into a kiss that was met with whoops and cheers from their friends. For a single, perfect moment, there were no warlords, no cosmic horrors, no condemning nations. There was only peace. The celebration that followed was a joyous, raucous affair. Choji was dominating the food table, Shikamaru was complaining about how troublesome everything was while a rare smile played on his lips, and Kiba was loudly arguing with Konkuro about whose animal companion was superior. It was loud, it was chaotic, and it was perfect. And then, it stopped. The laughter died in Choji's throat. Kiba's boastful words hung in the air, suddenly frozen. A kunai, thrown by Tenten in a demonstration for a Suna shinobi, stopped inches from the target log, suspended in midair. Everything and everyone, from the flut ring leaves on the trees to the flickering flames of the torches, froze in time. Everyone except Naruto and Lyra. They stood in a world of silent, motionless statues. The air grew cold, and the light seemed to dim, as if the sun itself was holding its breath. What's happening? Lyra whispered, her hand instinctively going to the hilt of the ceremonial blade at her hip. I don't know, Naruto said, the omnitrix on his wrist glowing with a faint, warning light. Three figures shimmered into existence before them. They were not shinobi. They were not human. They were tall, serene beings, clad in flowing white robes that seemed to be woven from solidified space-time. They had no faces, only smooth, blank expanses of porcelain white that reflected the frozen scene around them. Naruto Uzumaki, the central figure said. Its voice was a calm, melodic chorus of 1,000 voices speaking in perfect unison. It was a sound that was both beautiful and deeply unsettling. The causal anomaly designated 010. Who are you? Naruto demanded, stepping in front of Lyra, his body tensed for a fight. We are the chronomancers, the being replied, its lack of a face somehow conveying an expression of infinite patience. We are the guardians of the timeline, the surgeons of causality. We ensure the proper flow of history, from the first tick of existence to the last. It gestured to the frozen world around them. And you, child, are a disease in that flow. A disease, Naruto repeated, bewildered. Your existence was a low probability outcome. Your acquisition of the omnitrix, a near impossibility. The second chronomancer explained. Your actions have created paradoxes, divergent timelines, and chaotic energy signatures that threaten the very fabric of this reality. You are a loose thread that, if left unpulled, will unravel everything. We are not here to punish you, the third one added. Punishment is an emotional, temporal concept. We are here to correct, to heal. We will simply erase you. Your existence will be snipped from the timeline at the moment of your birth. The universe will right itself. No one will remember you. No one will have suffered from the consequences of your life. It will be a mercy. The central chronomancer, who seemed to be their leader, raised a hand. From its fingertips, threads of shimmering, golden light began to coalesce. Do not resist. The process will be painless. Naruto stared at the golden threads, the threads of his own life, about to be unraveled. He thought of Iruka, of Kakashi, of Jiraiya. He thought of Gaara, of Tsunade. He thought of Lyra. The idea of them forgetting him, of his entire struggle being for nothing, it was a fate worse than any death. No, he said, his voice a low growl. You're not touching my life. He slammed his hand on the omnitrix. He chose XLR8, hoping to outrun whatever they were doing. The green light flashed, but as his body began to change, one of the chronomancers simply gestured. A golden thread wrapped around the transformation, and it froze halfway, leaving Naruto a grotesque, half-formed statue. Your control of the device is impressive, the leader, Paradox, said calmly. But you are a child playing with a pocket watch. We are the timekeepers. He made to continue his work. Lyra acted. She unsheathed her blade and fired a brilliant star bolt at the chronomancer. The bolt left her sword, traveled 6 inches, and then simply stopped. Frozen in time, a brilliant green tear in the air. Your energy is impressive, Princess of the Fallen Star, Paradox noted, without even turning. But it, too, is bound by the laws of causality. Laws that we command. Naruto, trapped mid-transformation, struggled with all his might. He couldn't move his body, but his mind was still his own. He focused, pushing his consciousness into the omnitrix. His usual forms were useless. Strength, speed, elements, they were all concepts that existed within time. He needed something that existed outside of it. He scrolled past the 10 he knew, pushing deeper into the watch's matrix, to a silhouette that was locked, forbidden, a form so powerful the device itself warned against its use. He poured his will, his chakra, his very identity into unlocking it. He had to save his past to protect his future. The golden threads were about to touch him when a new light erupted from his body. It was not green. It was a brilliant, blinding white, the color of creation itself. The chronomancers were thrown back, their temporal hold shattered. The world of frozen statues was gone. Naruto and Lyra now stood in a swirling void of stars and nebulae. And Naruto was no longer Naruto. He was a humanoid silhouette made of the cosmos itself. His body was a living star field, galaxies swirling within his form. He had no discernible features, save for 3 horn-like protrusions on his head and the omnitrix symbol on his chest. He was celestial, a celestial sapien. A new voice echoed through the void, a voice that was Naruto's. But also the voice of a calm, serene woman and a deep, aggressive man, all speaking at once. You have interfered with this existence for the last time. Paradox and the other chronomancers recovered, their serene forms now showing a glimmer of what might have been surprise. A celestial sapien, the failsafe of last resort. You risk unmaking this entire dimension, you fool. The battle that followed was not one of fists or energy beams. It was a war of pure will, fought on the canvas of reality itself. A chronomancer gestured, and Naruto's past began to unravel. He saw himself as a lonely child on the swing set, fading away. The celestial form responded, and with a thought, solidified that moment, making it an immutable point in time. Another chronomancer tried to age him into dust. The celestial simply stopped the concept of aging within his own personal space. Paradox waved his hand, and 1,000 alternate versions of the battle appeared, each one ending in Naruto's erasure. But the celestial, with its 3 minds working in a complex, argumentative but ultimately unified purpose, saw every possibility simultaneously and nullified them all. Your power is to edit reality. The tripartite voice of the celestial boomed. Ours is to write it. You are scribes. We are the authors. The strain on Naruto's consciousness was immense. He was in a constant 3-way debate with the 2 other personalities of the celestial sapien, Bellicus, the voice of rage and aggression, and Serena, the voice of reason and compassion. To perform any action, he had to get them both to agree. He was a tie-breaker in a cosmic parliament. He wanted to protect his timeline. Bellicus wanted to destroy the chronomancers for their insolence. Serena wanted to find a peaceful solution. It was a battle on two fronts. Outside, against the chronomancers, and inside, against himself. He managed to find a middle ground. He wouldn't erase them. He wouldn't let them erase him. He would create a stalemate. With a final, massive exertion of will, he forced Bellicus and Serena to agree. He raised his cosmic hand. Motion denied, he declared. He didn't attack them. He simply created a single, immutable law for this pocket of reality. The chronomancers could not alter his personal timeline. It was now a fixed, absolute point. They could no longer touch his past or his future. The chronomancers stopped. Their power, for the first time, had met an immovable object. They could not win. They could not proceed. Paradox floated forward, the blankness of its face somehow conveying a sense of grudging respect. You have created a paradox lock around yourself. A fascinating, if reckless, application of celestial power. You have won this confrontation. The cosmic vista faded, and they were all back in the Nara forest. Time resumed. The kunai hit the log. Choji took a bite of his food. Everyone blinked, a moment of shared vertigo passing through them as if they just woken from a dream they couldn't remember. To them, no time had passed at all. The celestial form shimmered and, in a flash of white light, reverted to Naruto, who collapsed to his knees, gasping, the mental toll almost unbearable. The chronomancers remained, visible only to him and Lyra. We will honor the stalemate, Paradox said. We cannot erase you. But know this, Naruto Uzumaki. The reason we are so adamant is not just because you are an anomaly. It is because of what the omnitrix truly is. He raised his hand, and an image appeared in Naruto's mind, the vision of the Void Weaver, the great eye in the static. The fractured crystalline prison. The omnitrix is not a weapon, Paradox's voice echoed in his mind. It is a key. It is the master lock on the prison of the Void Weaver. The entity your new wife's people call the Great Nothing. Every time you use its power, especially a transformation as potent as a conductoid or a celestial sapien, you are turning that key. You are weakening the seal. The chaos you are creating in the timeline is nothing compared to the absolute oblivion that will be unleashed if that seal breaks. The chronomancers began to fade, their forms becoming translucent. We cannot erase you, Paradox's final words whispered across his soul. But we will be watching. And if your actions threaten to unlock that door, we will return. And next time, we will not be trying to erase you. We will be trying to erase this entire reality to prevent the contagion from spreading. The fate of everything now rests on your shoulders. Try not to doom us all. They vanished. Naruto was left kneeling in the dirt, the joyous sounds of his wedding celebration washing over him. He looked at Lyra, his wife, and she looked back, her eyes wide with a shared, terrible secret. Their wedding day, the happiest day of his life, had just become the day he learned he was the potential harbinger of the apocalypse. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. War for the Crimson Throne. The revelation from the chronomancers did not bring despair. It brought a terrifying, clarifying focus. The knowledge that the omnitrix was the lock on a cosmic prison, and that every transformation was a turn of the key, settled upon Naruto like a shroud of lead. The carefree joy he once felt when changing forms was gone, replaced by a grim, weighty calculation. Every transformation now had a price. A cosmic risk measured in the stability of reality itself. He and Lyra spent long nights poring over the data she had salvaged from her ship's logs, and the intel Jiraiya's spy network was now gathering. The Void Weaver was no longer an abstract nightmare, it was a strategic threat, the ultimate antagonist in a war they hadn't even known they were fighting. We can't just sit here and wait for Zarkon to recover, or for those time ghosts to come back, Naruto said one evening, pacing the floor of the Hokage's strategy room. The map of the elemental nations on the wall felt laughably small and quaint now. Every day we spend on defense is a day the seal gets weaker. Proactive defense, that's what Gray Matter said. It's the only way. To be proactive against Zarkon is to strike at the heart of his empire. Lyra said, her voice filled with a cold, hard fire. He is a cancer that has festered in the void for too long. My people suffer under his rule. My worlds burn. Her gaze hardened, and the fugitive princess vanished, replaced by the unwavering steel of a queen. My father's loyalists are scattered, leaderless. But they are not broken. If they had a banner to rally to, a symbol of hope, they would fight. Their path was clear. They could not win a war of attrition. They had to decapitate the snake. Lyra had to reclaim her throne. Their decision was solidified by an urgent dispatch from one of Jiraiya's toad spies on the fringe of the galaxy. Zarkon's empire was in turmoil, just as Jiraiya had predicted. The warlord's authority had been shattered. But the assaulting power vacuum was not being filled by rebels and freedom fighters. It was being consolidated by a new, more terrifying force. Grand Marshal Kale, the commander of Zarkon's elite fleet, a cold and ruthlessly efficient strategist who had long viewed his master's obsession with Earth as a tactical blunder, had staged a coup. He declared Zarkon unfit to rule, a relic blinded by personal vendettas. Kale's philosophy was simple. The Empire's humiliation on Earth was a stain that could only be cleansed with absolute annihilation. He had taken control of the main battle fleet in his first official order was to set a course back to their star system, not for an invasion, but for a final, punitive extermination. He's not coming for us, Naruto said, his fists clenched. He's coming to make a point. To glass the whole planet just to prove he's in charge. Then we must meet him in the stars, Lyra declared, her voice ringing with the authority of her birthright. We cannot allow him to reach this world. We will forge a fleet. And we will take back my capital, Xylos Prime. We will give the loyalists their banner. The logistics of building an army to fight a galactic war from a village of tree-running shinobi were, to put it mildly, staggering. But they were not without assets. Gaara, true to his word, committed a legion of Suna's most elite shinobi, masters of puppetry and long-range combat, to their cause. They would not be pilots, but they would be the ultimate special forces, a scalpel to be wielded in the heart of enemy territory. Lyra, using the last functioning piece of celestial technology from her escape pod, a quantum entanglement communicator, began broadcasting the ancient royal codes of her house, a call to arms that she could only pray her father's scattered forces would hear. The final piece of the puzzle came from the most unexpected of sources. Naruto was alone, meditating on the great stone face of the fourth Hokage, trying to quiet his mind and commune with the different consciousnesses within the Kinjin-trix, when the world around him froze. Paradox, the lead chronomancer, shimmered into existence before him. We are not allies, causal anomaly, the timeless being stated. Its chorus-like voice devoid of any warmth. Then what do you want? Naruto asked, not bothering to get up. He was growing weary of cosmic entities interrupting his brooding. Grand Marshal Kale is a predictable, linear thinker. His reign would lead to a short, brutal, but ultimately stable galactic order, Paradox explained. Lyravala's restoration, however, is a chaotic variable. Under normal circumstances, we would favor the predictable outcome. But, Naruto prompted, but Kale's obsession with cleansing this planet poses a direct threat to the Void Weaver's seal. A planetary bombardment would create a catastrophic energetic backlash, weakening the dimensional barriers far more than even your reckless transformations. His stability is not worth that risk. A star chart, impossibly detailed, appeared in the air between them. A single, remote nebula was highlighted. The remnants of the Xylarian royal fleet are hidden in the Ethelian nebula. They are waiting for a leader. We are not helping you. We are merely choosing the path of least temporal destruction. The chronomancer vanished, and time resumed its flow. Naruto was left with the coordinates that could win them the war. A gift from an enemy who saw him as a disease, but a less virulent one than the alternative. The journey was a revelation. Using a captured and repurposed legionary transport, modified by a team of Konoha's best seal masters to run on chakra-infused plasma, they made their first journey beyond their world's atmosphere. For Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, Kakashi, and the Suna contingent, watching their blue planet shrink behind them was a profound, life-altering experience. They were no longer just shinobi of their respective villages. They were astronauts, warriors of Earth, voyaging into an infinite, terrifying, and beautiful void. They arrived at the Ethelian Nebula, a breathtaking swirl of incandescent gas and newborn stars, to find a ghost fleet. Dozens of Xylarian cruisers and battleships, scarred but proud, drifted in the silent darkness, running on minimal power to avoid detection. When Lyra's ship broadcast the royal codes, the ghost fleet came to life. Lights blazed across their hulls. And they moved to intercept, their weapons hot. Their meeting took place on the bridge of the largest battleship, the Stardust Aegis. Its commander, a grim, battle-scarred veteran with a long white beard named General Vorin, knelt before Lyra, his eyes filled with a weary, reverent hope. "My Empress," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We had thought you lost. We had lost all hope. Hope is not lost, General," Lyra said, her voice echoing with a strength that commanded the attention of every soldier on the bridge. "It is reborn. We are taking back our home." She turned to her army. The hardened soldiers of her father's fleet and the strange, sand-dusted warriors from another world. And she introduced Naruto. "This is Naruto Uzumaki, Emperor Consort of the Xylurian Empire," she declared. Her hand finding his. "He is the champion of his world, the wielder of the anvil of life, and he is my partner. He bleeds for our cause as I do. We will lead you to victory, together." The shinobi of Konoha and Suna stood shoulder to shoulder with the golden-skinned warriors of Xylos, a strange but powerful alliance united behind their two leaders. They had a fleet. They had an army. They had a destination. Xylos Prime. The battle for the capital world was swift and brutal. Kale's fleet, caught by surprise as they were preparing their final jump to Earth's system, was forced to engage in their own territory. On the bridge of the Stardust Aegis, Lyra was a whirlwind of controlled, brilliant command. "General, concentrate fire on their lead cruiser's ventral shields. They are weakest there. Commander Tal, execute pattern Delta 7. Draw their fighters into the asteroid field," she commanded, her eyes dancing across a dozen tactical displays. She was no longer a princess. She was a naval genius, a warrior queen in her natural element. The space around her homeworld erupted into a maelstrom of plasma, torpedoes, and exploding ships. But the planet itself was protected by a massive, ground-based defense cannon, a fortress that was tearing through her fleet's shields. "We can't get close enough to the flagship while that cannon is active," Vorin reported, his face grim. "That's our job," Naruto said, standing beside her. He turned to his own hand-picked team. Sasuke, his Sharingan already spinning. Sakura, her hands glowing with green medical chakra. Kakashi, his expression calm and ready, and Gaara, his sand already swirling around him in a protective sphere. "Let's go take out the trash." They boarded a small, stealth insertion ship and plunged into the planet's atmosphere. Their target was the Citadel, a massive fortress that housed the defense cannon's control center. As they approached, the ground defenses roared to life, a curtain of laser fire filling the sky. "I'll handle it," Naruto yelled. He hit the Kinjin tricks, transforming into a new alien. He was a tall, gangly creature with a green and black body, a single large eye, and a gelatinous biomechanical physiology. This was Upgrade, a galvanic mechamorph. He phased through the ship's hull and merged with its systems. "Whoa, this tech is awesome." His voice, now metallic and distorted, crackled over the comms. The ship's engines glowed a vibrant green, and it began to move with an impossible, liquid grace, weaving through the laser fire. He fired the ship's own cannons, but the blasts were now green. Supercharged blasts of plasma that tore through the ground turrets. They crash-landed at the base of the Citadel. "Okay, not my best landing," Upgrade admitted, peeling himself off the control console. The assault on the Citadel was a blur of controlled chaos. Gaara's sand acted as both shield and spear, crushing legionary squads and forming barriers against plasma fire. Kakashi and Sasuke were a deadly duo of lightning and shadow, their Sharingan eyes predicting the enemy's every move. Sakura was the backbone of the operation, her medical jutsu healing wounds in seconds. Her chakra enhanced strength shattering armored doors. Naruto was the key. He cycled through forms with a speed and tactical precision he had never before possessed. He became Big Chill, a phantom-like necrophrygian, turning intangible to phase through walls and bypass security systems, freezing entire platoons of guards solid with his frost breath. In the main reactor room, he transformed into Homungosaur, a colossal Vaxasaurian, and physically tore the cannon's power core from its housing, the sheer, primal strength overwhelming the station's automated defenses. With the cannon disabled, Lyra's fleet broke through Kale's lines. She personally led the charge of the Stardust Aegis, her ship a silver spear aimed at the heart of the enemy flagship. She outflew, outthought, and outfought the Grand Marshal. Her brilliant, unorthodox tactics running circles around his rigid, predictable formations. The battle ended when the Stardust Aegis unleashed a full torpedo barrage into Kale's crippled bridge, forcing his surrender and shattering the morale of his remaining forces. On the bridge of her reclaimed flagship, standing over the captured and kneeling Grand Marshal Kale, Lyra received the report from the ground. "The citadel is ours, Empress." A cheer erupted through the fleet. The war was far from over, but the capital, the throne, was hers. She looked at the image of Naruto on the viewscreen, his face smudged with grease and soot, giving her a tired but triumphant grin. They had done it. It was in that moment of victory that an urgent, panicked message, amplified across subspace, reached them from Earth. It was from Tsunade. "Naruto, we have a problem. The moon. An energy signature. Something is wrong." The final scene cut from the triumphant bridge of a starship to the cold, silent surface of Earth's moon. In a hidden, ancient crater lay a structure that was not man-made, a temple of swirling white stone and dormant celestial technology. A team of Root Anbu, sent by a paranoid Danzo to investigate old legends, had just arrived. They found the main chamber breached, the air still crackling with a dark, unfamiliar energy. In the center of the chamber, a massive, crystalline power core, designed to be a planetary amplifier for celestial energy, had been ripped from its housing. In its place, painted in what looked disturbingly like blood, was a spiraling, eye-like symbol. The symbol of the Void Weaver. While the heroes were winning a war among the stars, a silent, insidious cult had just completed the second stage of their plan. They had stolen the key. And now, they were preparing to unlock the door. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The God in the Static. Victory was a fleeting, incandescent moment on the bridge of the Stardust Aegis, and then it was gone, snuffed out by the cold, panicked voice of Tsunade echoing across a quarter of the galaxy. The triumphant cheers of the Xylurian fleet died in their throats, replaced by a stunned, chilling silence. The war they had just won felt suddenly trivial, a regional squabble in the face of an incomprehensible crisis brewing at home. "Empress, what are your orders?" General Voran asked, his weathered face a mask of concern. Lyra's gaze was locked on the viewscreen, where Naruto's expression had hardened into one of grim, terrifying certainty. The Chronomancer's warning, a secret they had carried together, was now roaring to the forefront of their reality. This was it. The key was turning. "Set a course for Earth," Lyra commanded, her voice ringing with an authority that left no room for question. "Maximum speed. Inform the fleet that the battle for Xylos is won, but the war for our existence has just begun." The journey back was a tense, silent affair. They pushed the captured Legionary transport to its absolute limits, the seals on its chakra-infused reactor glowing with a dangerous intensity. There was no celebration, no talk of their victory over Kale. The shinobi and the Xylurian soldiers who had fought side by side now looked at each other with a shared, unspoken dread. They had faced a tyrant's army, a known quantity of ships and soldiers. Now they were flying Taua. RDS, a threat that had been described as the end of all things. Naruto and Lyra stood at the ship's main viewport, watching the star field streak past. "The Moon Temple," Lyra murmured, her mind racing through the ancient legends. It was one of a series of amplifiers the Celestials built, designed to channel and regulate the positive, creative energies of a solar system. If the cultists have corrupted it, they're not just breaking the lock from the inside, Naruto finished, the horrifying logic clicking into place. They're using an amplifier to broadcast the opposite. They're turning a megaphone for life into one for death. They're prying the door open from the outside, too. As they entered Earth's solar system, they could all feel it. A subtle wrongness. The light from the sun seemed thinner, the darkness of space deeper, more absolute. A faint, oily shimmer, a psychic static, clung to the planet's atmosphere like a disease. It was a sight that made the hair on their arms stand on end. They bypassed Konoha entirely, their small ship heading directly for the moon. Landing in the hidden crater that housed the celestial temple, they were met with a scene of quiet desecration. The swirling white stone of the temple was marred with jagged, purple cracks from which a dark, greasy energy seemed to bleed. Inside, the scene was worse. The pristine, ancient chamber was a battlefield. The bodies of several root Anbu were scattered across the floor, their corpses twisted and warped, their porcelain masks shattered. They had not been killed by weapons, they looked as if they had been unmade. In the center of the chamber, the massive housing for the lunar power core was empty, a gaping wound in the heart of the temple. Danzo, Kakashi surmised, his single eye taking in the scene with grim analysis. He must have suspected something and sent his own team to investigate or seize the artifact for himself. They weren't prepared for what they found. A faint groan came from beneath a pile of rubble. Sakura rushed over, her hands already glowing with green chakra as she pushed a heavy slab of stone aside. A single root operative lay pinned underneath, his body flickering in and out of existence like a faulty image. "Hold on," Sakura commanded, trying to stabilize him. Too late. The man wheezed, his voice glitching, skipping beats. "He was here, the scholar." "Who?" Naruto demanded, kneeling beside him. "Malachi," the Anbu gasped, his eyes wide with a remembered horror. "He spoke of the great silence, the perfection of the void. He said he was going to the origin of the whirlpool, to break the final seal." The man's body dissolved into a cloud of static and vanished. "The origin of the whirlpool," Jiraiya muttered, his eyes widening in dawning horror. "Uzushiogakure, the village hidden in the eddies. Your ancestral home, Naruto. A place of immense, untamed natural energy and the most powerful sealing jutsu ever created. It's the perfect place to perform a ritual to unseal something." The pieces snapped together with a dreadful, final clarity. The battle in space, the political turmoil, it had all been a grand diversion. While they were fighting for thrones and empires, the real war, the one for reality itself, was being lost in the ruins of Naruto's past. They arrived at the land of eddies to find a world coming undone. The archipelago, once a testament to the Uzumaki clan's mastery of sealing arts, was now a nexus of cosmic horror. The sea around the islands didn't churn with waves, but with a thick, viscous purple energy that boiled without heat. The sky was not blue, but a roiling, monochrome canvas of television snow. The very air hummed with a low, discordant frequency that vibrated in their teeth and made their thoughts feel scattered and thin. Jutsu became unreliable here. When Kiba tried to use his four legs technique, he briefly grew 2 extra heads. Shino's insects flew in frantic, nonsensical patterns, unable to perceive the world correctly. In the center of the largest island, amidst the crumbling, spiral-marked ruins of the main Uzumaki temple, the ritual was reaching its climax. The stolen lunar power core floated in the air, no longer a beacon of crystalline light, but a sphere of absolute darkness, a hole in the world that pulled at the light and sound around it. Around it, a dozen robed figures chanted in a language that was not human. Their voices creating the grating, dissonant hum that filled the air. And standing before the dark core, his arms outstretched as if to embrace oblivion, was Malachi. He was a gaunt, skeletal man with the feverish, burning eyes of a true believer. He had once been the elemental nation's foremost scholar on celestial lore, until his studies had driven him mad, convincing him that life itself was a chaotic, painful accident. "Behold," he cried, his voice amplified by the strange acoustics of the warped reality. "The primitives have returned. You come to fight the inevitable, to struggle against the glorious peace of the void. You are children, railing against the coming of a quiet night. It's not peace, Malachi. It's nothing," Jiraiya yelled, his voice sounding strangely flat and distant. Precisely. Malachi's laugh was a dry, crackling thing. The ultimate purity, an end to pain, to fear, to pointless struggle. The great weaver will devour all the flawed, noisy variables of existence and leave only the perfect, silent equation of zero. It is not an end. It is salvation. He slammed his hand onto the dark core. A wave of anti-energy erupted outwards. The very ground beneath their feet churned, and from the corrupted earth rose monsters. They were not creatures of flesh and blood, but things of glitch and error. A wolf with a face made of screaming static. A bird whose wings flapped in reverse, pulling the air apart. A shambling horror that was a mess of disconnected polygons and corrupted textures, like a character clipped from a broken game. "We have to stop him," Lyra commanded, taking charge. Her body ignited with green stellar fire, a beacon of pure, creative energy that seemed to physically push back against the encroaching static. Gaara, Sasuke, defend the perimeter. Do not let those things get close. Kakashi, Jiraiya, with me. We push through to the cultists. Sakura, keep everyone alive. Naruto. She looked at him, her eyes filled with a desperate understanding. She knew what he had to do. I know, he said, his voice grim. Buy me time. The battle was a nightmare. Gaara's sand would form a wall, only for it to momentarily. Why forget the concept of solidity and collapse into a pile of useless grains? Sasuke's Chidori would form, but instead of lightning, it would discharge a flock of screeching, ghostly birds. They were fighting not just monsters, but the breakdown of the laws of physics. Lyra was their anchor. Her stellar energy, born of creation, was the only thing that remained stable, a tool of order in a world of chaos. Her star bolts were the only attacks that reliably destroyed the glitch monsters, unmaking the unmade. She, Jiraiya, and Kakashi fought like demons, a desperate spearhead trying to pierce the heart of the ritual. Naruto ignored the battle raging around him. He walked calmly towards the epicenter of the chaos, the very eye of the hurricane, and sat down cross-legged on the fractured, spiral marked flagstones of his ancestors' home. He looked at the roiling static in the sky, at the hungry darkness of the corrupted core, and he closed his eyes. He placed his hands on the Kinjin tricks. It's not a weapon, it's a lock, but maybe, it can also be a shield. He didn't try to transform into a single alien. He reached deeper, past the interface, into the very core of the device. He called upon the coded essences of all 10 of his primary forms at once. The raw strength of Homungosaur, the speed of XLR8, the intelligence of gray matter, the elemental fury of Heat Blast, the intangibility of Big Chill, the regenerative energy of Swampfire, the crystalline durability of Diamond Head, the electrical absorption of Feedback, the sonic power of Echo Echo, the strange reality warping potential of a Celestial Sapien. He wasn't trying to become them. He was trying to become the concept behind them. The unifying principle of the anvil of life. A pillar of pure, white light erupted from his body, shooting into the static-filled sky and punching a hole through it to the true stars beyond. It was not a violent light, but a profound, ordering one. Within that light, his physical form became a statue of glowing, ethereal energy. Seated in a meditative pose, his friends, battered and bleeding, saw the light and understood. They formed a desperate, protective circle around him, a final, defiant stand. He is becoming one with the Prime Codex. Malachi shrieked, a look of genuine fear finally entering his eyes. No, it is too late. The door is already open. Behold your salvation. The dark core pulsed one last time, and reality shattered. Naruto's consciousness was flung into the void. He was adrift again in that place of absolute nothingness, before the fractured, crystalline seal. But this time, he was not small. He was not afraid. He was a being of pure, ordered energy, a miniature celestial forged from his own will and the legacy of 1,000 warrior species. The seal before him crumbled completely, dissolving into dust, and from the prison, the Void Weaver emerged. It was not a monster. It was a presence, an infinite, all-encompassing consciousness of pure entropy. He perceived it as the great, static-filled eye, now unobscured, and it turned its full, undivided attention upon him. It did not attack. It simply spoke. It showed him his life, every moment of pain, every second of loneliness, every bitter failure. It showed him the scorn of the villagers, the grief of losing his parents, the agony of his friends' injuries. All of this is struggle, the Weaver communicated. It's thought a soothing balm of absolute despair. All of this is pain, a flaw in the design. Let it go. Cease your struggle. Cease your being. Find the peace that you have always craved. The peace of silence. The peace of nothing. It was the ultimate temptation. An end to all suffering. It was a lie more beautiful and seductive than any truth. On the physical plane, the world was ending. The sky had been completely replaced by static. The ruins of Uzushiogakure were being erased, bit by bit, the very atoms of the stones coming undone. The glitch monsters dissolved, replaced by a greater threat, reality-warped horrors. Amalgams of the team's own fears. Sasuke saw a twisted version of Itachi. Gaara saw his father, his skin cracking to reveal the screaming face of Shukaku. Their defenses were crumbling. Their hope was fading. Lyra stood before Naruto's glowing form, her green energy the only thing holding the tide of chaos at bay, but she was weakening, her light flickering like a dying candle. "Naruto," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Please." In the void, Naruto, the temporary celestial, faced the infinite temptation of the Void Weaver. The battle for the universe would not be won with a Rasengan or a star bolt. It would be won or lost here, in the silent space between one thought and the next. A battle of hope against the sweet, serene promise of oblivion. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Emperor and the Empress. In the silent, timeless void, the ultimate battle was not one of energy or force, but of competing philosophies. The Void Weaver did not CK Naruto's celestial form with tendrils of darkness or blasts of anti-energy. It assaulted him with the truth. It held up a perfect, unblemished mirror to his life, forcing him to confront the sheer, overwhelming weight of his own pain. He saw himself as a child, utterly alone, ostracized for a power he never asked for, the word, monster, a constant, poison-tipped whisper in his wake. He felt the sting of every prank that was a desperate cry for attention, every moment of hunger, every cold night spent in his empty apartment. This is the nature of existence, the Weaver's thought flowed into him, a soothing, logical caress. A series of meaningless struggles, punctuated by brief, fleeting moments of relief. All of it leading to the inevitable decay. Why cling to the struggle? Why endure the pain? I offer you the release. The final, perfect peace. He saw the Uchiha massacre, the haunted, hateful eyes of his best friend. He saw the death of the third Hokage, the loss of Jiraiya at the hands of pain. The countless shinobi who had died in the wars. He saw every failure, every mistake, every moment his strength had not been enough. Your power only invites greater conflict, the Weaver continued, its logic inescapable. The stronger you become, the greater the threats you attract. You are a lightning rod for suffering. Your very existence creates pain, not just for you, but for all those you foolishly try to protect. Lay down your arms. Lay down your will. In my embrace, there is no failure. There is no loss. There is only silence. The temptation was a physical thing, a sweet, heavy pressure on his soul. The promise of an end to the fight, an end to the crushing weight of responsibility, was the most seductive thing he had ever known. A part of him, the lonely child on the swing set, wanted nothing more than to give in, to let the silence wash over him and take the pain away forever. On the physical plane, that moment of hesitation had catastrophic consequences. The thin barrier of hope protecting his friends began to fail. Lyra was thrown back by a wave of pure entropy, her stellar light flickering violently. Gaara's ultimate defense was unraveled, his sand turning to inert dust. Sasuke found himself fighting a phantom Itachi that knew his every move, its Mangekyo Sharingan casting an illusion of absolute despair. The circle around Naruto's glowing form was breaking. They are already lost, the Weaver whispered in his mind. Their struggles are pointless. End their suffering. End your own. It is the only truly merciful act. Naruto, the Celestial, stood on the precipice of oblivion. He looked into the great, static eye of the Void Weaver. He saw the logic. He saw the truth in its argument. And he found his answer. You're wrong. His voice, the unified chorus of the Celestial, echoed in the void. It was not a shout of defiance, but a simple statement of fact. He held up a cosmic hand, and a new image formed in the nothingness. It was a memory, Iruka-sensei, his back bleeding from a giant shuriken, shielding a young Naruto and weeping as he called him not a demon, but a cherished student. Pain is real, Naruto's voice stated. But so is this. Another image. Team 7, bickering and laughing after their first successful C-rank mission, sharing a meal. Kakashi, his eye curved in a rare, genuine smile. Struggle is real, but so is this. Image after image flowed from him. Jiraiya, ruffling his hair and proudly proclaiming him his godson. Gaara, calling him a friend for the first time. Sakura, punching him for his stupidity and then healing his wounds with gentle hands. And Lyra, taking his hand in the hospital and telling him he was a hero. You say existence is a flaw, the Celestial continued, its form glowing brighter, the stars within it burning with a fierce, defiant light. You say the struggle is meaningless. But you're only looking at half of the equation. The pain is what gives the joy its meaning. The struggle is what makes the victory worth fighting for. The darkness is what makes the light so damn beautiful. You offer a perfect, silent zero. I choose the messy, loud, painful, wonderful, imperfect everything. He turned his full will on the Kinjin-trix. Not as a weapon, but as a conduit. He was the descendant of the Uzumaki clan, the masters of the most powerful sealing jutsu the world had ever known. It was in his blood. It was his birthright. He reached into his own core, past the borrowed power of the aliens, past the hateful rage of the Nine Tails, and touched his own soul. He pulled on his own indomitable will. The never give up philosophy that had defined his entire life, and began to weave it into a new, ultimate seal. He poured his memories, his connections, his love for the flawed, beautiful world he was fighting for, into the energy flowing through him. I am not a lock you can pick, he declared to the Void Weaver. He wasn't just reinforcing the prison. He was becoming it. He was forging a new seal not of chakra and script, but of pure, unadulterated life force and the Uzumaki will to live. He pushed that will into the core of the Kinjin-trix, a final, definitive act. I am the seal, and I will never be broken. A wave of pure, creative, life-affirming energy erupted from him, a conceptual counterattack. It was not an attack the Void Weaver could absorb or deflect, because it was not an attack. It was a statement. Life is better than death. Something is better than nothing. The great eye of static wavered. For the first time in its eons-long existence, its perfect, nihilist sea logic had been met with a paradox it could not resolve. The seal, now infused with Naruto's very soul, slammed shut, not as a fractured crystal prison, but as a seamless, living barrier of will. The Weaver was not destroyed. It was answered, and it was silenced, pushed back into a slumber deeper than any it had known before. On Earth, the effect was instantaneous. The static sky vanished, replaced by the breathtaking, vibrant colors of a sunrise. The dissonant hum was replaced by the gentle sound of the sea. The reality-warped monsters dissolved into motes of harmless light. The phantoms tormenting Sasuke and the others vanished. Malachi, his connection to his god severed, let out a single, soul-shattering shriek of despair and collapsed, his mind wiped clean, leaving nothing but a hollow, empty shell. The pillar of white light around Naruto receded, flowing back into his body. He slumped forward, unconscious. His friends, battered, bleeding, but alive, rushed to his side. As they reached him, the Kinjin-trix on his wrist glowed with a final, intense white light. It melted like hot wax, flowing over his skin, not burning him, but bonding with him. When the light faded, the watch was gone. In its place, on the back of his left hand, was a glowing green tattoo of the hourglass symbol. It was a part of him now, forever. Lyra gently cradled his head in her lap, tears of relief streaming down her face as she felt the steady, rhythmic beat of his heart. They had won. The return to Konoha was the return of a legend. The entire world had felt the tremor in reality, had seen the sky fill with static. They had felt the oppressive psychic weight of the Void Weaver's near emergence, a shared, global nightmare. And then, they had felt its release, the clean, beautiful dawn that followed. They didn't know the specifics. But they knew one thing. A great darkness had come for them, and the knucklehead ninja from Konoha had stood against it and won. The emergency cage summit was convened not with demands, but with a humbled, terrified silence. Naruto and Lyra stood before the holographic images of the world's most powerful leaders, and they told them everything. About the Celestials, about the Kinjin-trix, about the Void Weaver. The Raikage, for the first time in his life, looked small. The Tsuchikage looked ancient and frail. There were no more accusations, no more threats. There was only the dawning, horrifying realization of how close their world had come to utter non-existence. What do you want, Uzumaki? The Raikage asked, his voice a low rumble, stripped of its usual arrogance. Want? Naruto looked at Lyra, then back at the cage. I don't want anything, but I'm telling you how it is. The old days of fighting each other over patches of dirt are over. There are bigger things in the universe than us, and we either stand together, or we fall apart. A new era for their world began that day. An era of forced cooperation, of a global defense initiative with Konoha and its powerful alien-infused shinobi at its center. They didn't have to like him, but they could no longer deny him. The months that followed were a whirlwind of change. The alliance between Earth and the Xylurian loyalists was formalized. With Zarkon's empire in chaos and Kale's fleet in disarray, Lyra's forces, bolstered by shinobi tactics and Naruto's targeted surgical strikes, began the long, arduous process of liberating her worlds. She was no longer just a princess, she was a unifier, a warrior queen leading her people out of darkness. Earth itself was transformed. Xylurian technology, shared freely, revolutionized their world. Clean energy, advanced medicine, new materials. Konoha became a strange and beautiful fusion of the old and the new. Ancient temples stood beside sleek, anti-gravity shuttles. Shinobi trained in taijutsu in one field, and in zero-gravity combat in the next. Danzo, for his part in inadvertently aiding the cult and for his unauthorized, disastrous mission to the moon, was finally brought to justice. Stripped of all power and influence by a furious Tsunade, he was confined to house arrest for the remainder of his days, a relic of an old, paranoid world that no longer had a place for him. It was on the one-year anniversary of their wedding that Naruto and Lyra stood on the balcony of the new Hokage Tower, a structure now built of earth, wood and Xylurian meta-alloys. The village spread out below them, vibrant and alive. "It's still weird, seeing it like this," Naruto said, gesturing to a Xylurian patrol cruiser that hung in the evening sky like a second, crescent moon. "It is our home now, Naruto," Lyra said softly, her hand finding his. "Both of ours." He looked at her, at the empress of a dozen worlds who had chosen to make her home with him in his noisy, troublesome village. Her eyes still shone like emeralds, but the haunted look was gone, replaced by a calm, steady strength. From an ambush in the forest of death to this, he mused, a small, genuine smile on his face. He looked down at the back of his hand, where the hourglass symbol glowed with a soft, green light, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. The power was still there, but it was quiet now, a part of his soul. "It's been a crazy ride, and it is far from over," she said, her gaze turning towards the star-dusted sky. Her empire was still being rebuilt. Zarkon was still out there, somewhere. The chronomancers were still watching, and the Void Weaver was still sleeping, sealed away by a promise made of flesh and will. Naruto followed her gaze, his hand tightening around hers. The universe was vast, filled with endless threats and infinite possibilities. But for the first time in his life, he didn't feel alone in the face of it. He was not just Naruto Uzumaki, the Jinchuriki. He was a husband, a leader, a hero. He was the emperor consort of a rising galactic power. He was the guardian of his world. And he was ready for whatever came next. They stood together, a boy from a forgotten clan and a princess from a fallen star, and watched the heavens, their adventure just beginning. Chapter 10 End.